It's WFUV and WFUV HD, New York. Listener supported public media from Fordham, the Jesuit University of New York. Right here on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVSports.org. This is One on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVSports.org.
Hey, what's chillin' party people? This is One on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show here on WFUV 90.7, WFUV.org, WFUVSports.org, Facebook, YouTube, all these different places. However it is that you may be joining us, we are incredibly grateful you're spending your Saturday night with us. My name is Dylan Balsamo, here live from my basement, and here with me is my co-host for the day. It's Kelly Bright. How's it going, Kelly?
It's going wonderfully. You're in your basement. I'm in my one-bedroom apartment. It doesn't get better than this on a Saturday night.
If you don't mind me asking, where is your one-bedroom apartment?
South Jersey. I'm here in South Jersey for the summer. I know we have Kayla coming on later, who's an OG South Jersey girl. This is new for me. This is new. I'm not sure how I like the North. I'm from North Carolina, so this is different, but I'm getting used to it.
Well, it's interesting because, you and Kayla, who is our headlines host, who will be joining us later today, folks, you guys are both in South Jersey. Myself and our producer for the day, Alex Wolz, and our producer for everything, really, Alex Wolz, we are both North Jersey OGs. So I feel like there's a bit of a culture war going on in this episode. Do you think that's right?
I mean, I'm new here, but I could see that. And I've heard there's a big war about the breakfast sandwich.
Yes, interesting. So we pre-recorded an interview for today. Our producer Alex and I talked to Gregg Caserta, who we'll get to that later in the show. But he works for the Trenton Thunder, the Yankees, I believe, AA affiliate, and he was wearing a hat for the Trenton Thunder that had said breakfast sandwich on it, and he called it pork roll.
There you go.
He called it a pork roll hat. And then I corrected him because there's a correct answer. And then he revealed that, he's a North Jersey guy. So it's just when he has the hat on. It was just to keep his job. And I appreciated that. But the point is, it's Taylor ham.
Yeah, I feel like Taylor ham is like the Kleenex versus tissues debate. It's pork roll. At the end of the day, it's pork roll.
Well, yeah. Okay. So a lot of people will give, this is a great thing to start off the show with. I'm glad you've all joined us, everybody. So here's the thing. People will argue that it's called pork roll and then Taylor is just the brand. And that's a fair argument. But Kelly, let me ask you this. When you were a kid and you would fall on concrete or something, and you would get like a little boo-boo or something on your knee or your elbow or something, what would you put on that injury?
I wish I didn't have to say this, but I would put a Band-Aid on that injury.
Exactly. That Band-Aid is a brand. Do you understand what I'm saying? The product is a bandage. But no one says bandage. What is this? The Red Cross? This is not how we operate. This is not how we operate. So that is my justification for the argument. But again, we're really getting down to the important stuff here today. And that's what I love about this show. We always talk about the most hot pressing issues really in the world. So I'm very glad we've hit this point. But Kelly, we've got so much to talk about in the sports world today. There's so much going on. You look at New York baseball, for example. We got two teams here in New York. I don't know if you at home know this, but we have two baseball teams here in New York. And one of them is doing significantly better than the other. And I don't think it's who anyone expected at the beginning of the season.
Except for you, Dylan. Am I right?
Well, I had my expectations. I also had my thoughts on what might happen.
Fair.
Not 100% sure it was going to happen. But it's happening. And the team we're talking about here is the Metropolitan Baseball Club of New York, also known as the New York Mets, who, despite a plethora of injuries, despite many game cancellations and delays due to weather and COVID and all these different other things, have sketched themselves into first place in the National League East here on June the 12th as we record this. This is not something anyone expected, but for a myriad of reasons, they are the best team in the National League East.
They're the only team above 500. And the next place person is 3.5 games back. I mean, it's not even close. And I think one of the biggest reasons for that is not only a great pitcher, but also a great hitter, Jacob deGrom. Ohtani, who I think Jacob is really taking the stage. He has more RBIs than earned runs. That speaks for itself. That's insane.
He has driven in more runs this season than curveballs he has thrown in a game. I think, to me, that's the craziest thing. That Jacob deGrom has a killer curveball. He's used it, I think, twice. He didn't use it until, I think, his start in Arizona like a week and a half ago. That was his first time using it all season. That's crazy to me. But aside from the Mets, we've got lots of other things to talk about, because the Yankees, the other team here in New York, as they're called in my house, are really struggling. And I don't think anyone expected this, but the trouble is the offense.
Right. If you look at the Yankees, I mean, if you think about what the best Yankees teams ever were, whether it was 1927, 61, 98, whatever legendary Yankee roster you look at, it's always about offense. It's always their hitters. And now you look at this team and the tables have turned. I mean, the pitching's been great. Great. It's maybe not as good as the Mets, but the pitching has been solid. And except for Aaron Judge, they got 99 other problems, and they're all surrounding hitting. So they need to find an answer to that, because just like it seems to be every year, the Yankees have all these expectations going into the season. And then, I mean, as a Red Sox fan, I'm happy to say that they don't really meet those expectations. And maybe it's a little too early to hit the panic button, but it's definitely interesting what's going on there in the Bronx.
Yeah, I mean, the Yankees pitching has been fine. It's been fine. You know, Garrett Cole has been Garrett Cole. He's been everything you expect him to be. The second best pitcher in baseball and New York. You know, Corey Kluber has thrown a no-hitter. There has been pitching success for the Yankees this year, which is not what they expected. We're going to talk about this a whole bunch during the show. We got a couple great guests on who we can talk baseball with. We got Gregg Caserta. We got John Jastremski. There's so much to talk about. But baseball aside, we also have two New York teams that are fighting for championships right now, and they both might win them.
Yeah, what a time to be a New York fan. I mean, everyone was talking about everyone was talking about the Knicks this year. Why wouldn't you? They had such a great season, but the Nets kind of flew under the radar, and they're probably, like you mentioned, they're probably going to win a championship. They're the best team in basketball right now, and they just dropped that game 3 against the Bucks, but they have been absolutely dominant, and they're missing one of their best players. James Harden is hurt, and they're destroying teams in round 2 of the playoffs. I mean, the Nets are ridiculous, and of course the Islanders as well. They just beat my Boston Bruins, so a little heartbroken from that. But again, another New York team that's scrappy and has low-key flown under the radar, but they have a legitimate chance of winning a championship. It's an exciting time to be a New York sports fan.
It's not often that the best team in basketball will fly under the radar in their own city. But you're absolutely right. They really kind of have. And just the fact that, you know, when the Knicks are good, that is the headline. And like you whether you think they're New York's team or not, you just have to accept that. Like, the back page of the Post is going to be the Knicks if they're good. And sometimes it is if they're bad too. So that is why the Nets have flown under the radar. But nevertheless, you know, you're absolutely right. They're the best team in basketball. And, you know, they're at least, like, with the Nets, they're flashy because they got 3 of the best players in all of basketball. And as Charles Barkley never fails to mention, they are a super team, as much as he doesn't like that. But you look at the Islanders, they're not as flashy, and they're just as good.
Yeah, I mean, you look at that team, and I think it's a great team to fall in love with. It's a great team to watch. I mean, you know, they have the New York Saints thing going on for them right now. They have that little push for their fans to hang on to. But this is a team that doesn't really have a star, you know, and they're playing a Lightning team that has a whole lot of stars. And I think that's almost an advantage for them, because if you're an opposing coach, who do you pick out as your game plan? Who do you try and shut down? Which line do you try and shut down when their first line is just as good as their third, and I think that having a deep team, no matter what sport it is very helpful the later you get on into the postseason.
Not too many stars, as Kelly says, on that Islander team, but we got lots of stars on the show today. It's me and Kelly, our friend Kayla Wenzel, who's kind of a star, our producer Alex Wolz, we've got Gregg Caserta, we've got John Jastremski, we've got a couple special guests today. We're going to talk baseball in just a second. We're going to have our friend and fellow Mets beat reporter Sam Davis on the show. There's so much going on today. I hope you join us. We'll be right back in just a second here on One on One.
One on One has a brand new YouTube channel. Subscribe to WFUV Sports to catch our simulcast Saturday nights and get notifications so you never miss another show. Miss the show? You can find on-demand segments, interviews, and highlights every week. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
Here we are, on Earth together. It's you and I. Welcome back to One on One, everybody, here on WFUV 90.7 FM, WFUVsports.org, WFUV.org, Facebook, YouTube, all of these wonderful different places. We're on all of them, and we're talking sports here until 2 a.m. So thank you for joining us. My name's Dylan Balsamo again, here with my friend Kelly Bright. Now, we're going to talk some baseball for a little while. And who better to bring in than our friend and my fellow Mets beat reporter for this season, Mr. Sam Davis. How's it going, Sam?
It's great to be here, Dylan. Thank you. I'm looking forward to talking some Mets. They're in a very exciting team right now.
They certainly are. And so let's get right into it. So you were at the game last night.
Yep.
First game at home against the Padres. This is bound to be as electric of a series as the Mets are going to play at Citi Field all season. And, you know, I was really looking forward to it. I'm sure you were as well. Take us through last night. It was a 3-2 victory. Take us through the events of last night. Jacob deGrom goes 6 innings. Comes out a little early. Seems like an over precaution of some kind. Tell us about it.
Yeah, I mean, it was just the energy, the electricity was just incredible, just even before the game and during it as well. The fans simply brought it. You could tell how excited they were to be there. They knew, just like we did, how big of a matchup it was. Obviously, the Padres are a very good team. We just had a chance to play them last week at Petco Park. So we've seen them before. And having them come to Citi Field, obviously the crowd A lot more people in the stands, the most since 2019, actually, as they're starting to kind of lift restrictions at Citi Field. It's not full capacity, but I think it was about 26,000. So they had a big jump in attendance, which was huge. It played into the electricity. DeGrom was dominant. I mean, for a while there, I mean, it was perfect game, no hitter watch there. And then all of a sudden he did give up that first hit, but he was cruising through 6 innings, 80 pitches. And then all of a sudden you're a little worried, a little concerned. It seemed like kind of a roller coaster. You went from very exciting to all of a sudden, what's wrong with Jacob DeGrom? Nobody seemed to know. He was out of the game after only 6 innings, threw only 80 pitches. Fortunately, it's just precautionary. He says he's going to come back and pitch in 5 days rest, so that's not really a concern. But it was certainly a roller coaster because immediately after, then Castro gives up a 2-run homer. All of a sudden, it's a 1-run game. And these Mets fans went from electric and excited to pretty nervous, pretty tense. But I think it was a huge game for this Mets team to win just because being back in front of the crowd, lots of fans there. Obviously, DeGrom gave you a great start. And to be honest, this team, I can't help but be very optimistic about them. They're playing great baseball right now. That I love their attitude, just the confidence that this team has, and especially those bench guys that I put in air quotes there because they're really not anymore. But with the way they're playing, and you know, it takes a lot of pressure off those injuries and when those guys are going to come back. So it's all optimism right now in New York for this Mets team.
And Sam, you mentioned the bench guys. Billy McKinney is someone to me who has just stepped up beyond expectations. He's been electric in that Mets offense. You mentioned the Mets have dealt with a lot of injuries this season. And as guys start to come back, players like Billy McKinney, Kevin Pillar, Mason Williams, people who've had to step up in those positions, that's going to present some interesting lineup situations. Do you get rid of those guys once the people come back, once people who have been out come back? Do you think they have performed well enough to stay in a starting lineup position? I mean, Brian McKinney, 5 doubles, 12 RBIs, 4 home runs. That's an impressive stat line for someone who's just joined the team 3 weeks ago. So do you think he has given himself enough of a resume to be able to stay in the lineup once some of their hurt players come back?
You know, Kelly, that's a great point. And that's something I was going to mention too, because I think Luis Rojas has a little bit of a problem on his hands. Maybe it's a good problem to have when some of these guys come back from injury. I'm looking at JD Davis. I'm looking at Brandon Nimmo specifically because you're already starting to see it. Luis Guillorme came off the IL, I believe, yesterday, and they're going to put him at second base because Jonathan Villar is playing so well at third base right now. You have to keep him in the lineup. He's not a guy that was an everyday starter come the beginning of the year. Now it looks like he might be. So that's an example of kind of it already happening. And then Pillar in the outfield has been great. McKinney, like you mentioned, has been great. He has 13 hits in 13 games with the Mets so far this year. So he's been tremendous for them. It's going to be difficult for Rojas. I don't know where he's going to go. I think at the end of the day, eventually, guys like Nimmo, guys like Conforto are going to get back in the lineup and are going to be those everyday starters. But I don't think it's going to be just giving up their spot. Maybe Rojas will, I don't know, make it a little bit of a competition to see which guy comes out on top, because the bottom line right now is you don't want to screw it up. The Mets are winning ball games, and they're winning, and they're in first place, and they're playing well with the guys that are on the field right now. So if I were Rojas, I wouldn't be so quick to take them out all of a sudden when some of these starters come back. I don't really know what he's going to do. It's going to be a difficult situation, I would say. I guess my guess is that he's just going to kind of play it by performance. If McKinney continues to hit, if Pillar continues to hit, I don't think you should take them out. If those guys start to slump a little bit or slide down, then all of a sudden you think about when is Nimmo coming back in Conforto. But it's not a concern right now, which is really good. Normally with teams that are injured like this, it's like, oh, I can't wait for these guys to be back because we need to start winning games. The Mets are still winning games and they're not on the field. So I guess it's a good problem to have, I would say.
Kelly and I joined by Sam Davis, my fellow Mets beat reporter here on One-on-One. Now, Sam, you mentioned, the Mets winning bowl games and that being the bottom line. There's, for the life of me, I can't figure this out. There's something that is driving this team's success that, like, statistically or tactically or tangibly, I can't put my finger on. It seems to be some kind of, whether that be some kind of mentality or some momentum they've been riding that is indescribably driving this team. Do you have any idea what it is? Because I don't.
Well, I mentioned earlier, and I think like mindset, what you just said is kind of something where I can point to. I don't think I don't think that's the sole reason why they're winning ball games. Obviously, it's not. You need a lot of things to happen to win, but I think the mindset and the confidence, especially from guys that, normally are on the bench and normally just coming up and hitting once in a while, that's a really tough role because you really only, pinch hitting is very difficult. Coming up and playing defense in the 8th inning is very difficult after being cold on the bench all game long. That's a tough thing to do. And I think a lot of these guys are just really excited to have the chance to go out and play every single day, something they may have not done at all in their major league career, or at least didn't expect to do with this Mets team. And they're just excited and taking advantage of it. And now these guys are starting to get really confident, like Pilar, VR. I mean, you can go down the list. McKinney, Peraza is another good example. These guys are just playing with a lot of confidence is what I see, at least. Obviously, I'm not in their heads, but that's what I think is a big difference because, they say baseball is a lot of a mental game and not much physical. Well, I think the mental side of this game for this Mets team, they've controlled it very well. They're confident and they're on a roll. And it's only going to help that Citi Field is welcoming back even more fans, get the electricity going, get these guys even more pumped up, especially for a big series like this against the Padres. And they also have a couple of pretty tough series coming up, a lot of divisional opponents coming up. So this is going to be a real make or break period, I think, for the Mets.
Yeah, exactly. And the mentality is going to be extremely important, especially considering yesterday's game was the start of a stretch of 33 games in a month. Mm-hmm. That's averaging more than 1 game per day. So this is going to be a tough schedule for this Mets team. Like you mentioned, a couple of huge series matchups, including this one. So I think it also helps when your best players are doing exactly what they're supposed to do. Pete Alonso, he is on fire since he came off the IL. In his last 7 games, he's hitting 370, 393, 741 for his slash. So he has been so impressive. And we mentioned DeGrom earlier at the beginning of the show, and I think he's worth mentioning again. I mean, he has just been so lights out. And luckily that injury seems like it won't be anything too big to worry about. But if you have him on your team, 0.56 ERA, the greatest start in baseball history to a season. I mean, it's hard to be real worried for what's coming ahead, especially when Marcus Stroman's your number 2 and Walker's your number 3. So they have the best 3-man rotation in baseball at this point. But what about the rest of the rotation? I mean, you have guys who are still injured, hopefully coming back soon, Syndergaard and Carrasco. They're slated for August and July returns respectively. But is it worth this team looking to get some help beyond those first 3, get some rotational help, maybe on the market for some veteran starting pitcher who's maybe on a bad team? Is it worth them looking to help what's already a very strong pitching rotation?
I think it's definitely worth them looking because you're right that bottom of the rotation is not very good at all. It's a huge drop off from those first 3. Basically, between Peterson, who has been terrible lately, to be honest, and Lucchesi, who is, more of an opener, it's back-to-back bullpen games, really, back-to-back days, and that puts a lot of strain on that bullpen, which I think is really concerning for this team because they're going to need those guys to step up down the stretch or even potentially in October. So I think going out and looking, you can't really get hurt with that. I think the thought process of this team is getting Carrasco back. I think is that primary. Syndergaard's going to be a little bit further away. They're not exactly sure what they're going to get. Obviously, he will enter the rotation if he's healthy. But Carrasco's a big one, I think, to be that 4th starter, to be behind Walker. That's all he really needs to be. And he's a very good pitcher. I think originally people would think he would slide into that number 3 spot behind Stroman, but because of how well Walker's pitching, he doesn't even need to really do that. All he's got to be is like a 4th starter. Come playoff time, if he is there at that 4th starter, this rotation is incredible, in my opinion. It's really good. So I think that's the hope for this Mets team, but there's no hurt in looking because you never know with injuries. Who knows how long Carrasco is going to be? It's been delayed. And then Syndergaard has also been delayed. So I think looking, it could be something they do towards the deadline. But I mean, I would be confident that Carrasco can come back and be that number 4.
Sam, you talk about, this starting staff, and you look at Jacob deGrom, who's been leaving games early, really for about 2 weeks now. Mm-hmm. And I think that's as much protecting his physical health as it is protecting that below 1 ERA, which I would too. I would be very protective of that. But, Sam, you look at this first place New York Mets team, and people have been asking me, I'm sure it's been happening to you too. People have been asking me for weeks now, what's going to happen when the Braves get good? What's going to happen when the Phillies get good? I don't know. And I go, I don't know. Stop asking me all these questions. But so my question for you here has this team done well enough in these first 2.5 months to keep themselves in a divisional race when Atlanta inevitably improves?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know for sure. And obviously I can't look too far in the future right now because you're right. The NL East has been way worse than everyone thought, which is a big surprise. But I mean, the Mets are playing really well right now. So I'm not really looking outside of this Mets team at the division just because obviously they're not playing well right now. But in general, we get to see the Mets all the time. And I'm just looking on the field production about how well they're playing. And I'm very surprised. I'm very impressed with how they've been doing. They're getting those guys back from injury. Guys are starting to come back. And the starters that were previously really struggling are starting to hit, like you said earlier, Kelly. So I think they're in it in this division down the stretch. I don't see them really falling off outside of something disastrous, but who knows with this Mets team. But I think the Braves will get better. I think the Phillies will get better. To me, it's a shock that they are where they are, and that could make for a pretty tight divisional race, which could be difficult for this Mets team because the wild card in the NL is also going to be a pretty tight race, I would say, because you got the Padres who probably won't win the division. You have the Giants who are overachieving right now, but could be a wild card team as well. That NL West with them and the Dodgers is pretty stacked. So that could be a little bit tricky down the stretch if, let's say, the Braves or Phillies get really hot. And all of a sudden the Mets go from winning the division to just outside the wild card just because of how good the National League is. But I really think this Mets team is going to contend for the division down the stretch, to answer your question. I would be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if the Braves and Phillies come up and start to play better and play how they should, to be honest. But this Mets team just needs to keep playing the way they're playing right now. And I think they'll be in it in the division for sure down the stretch.
Yeah, and injuries are never a helpful thing, but I think it's almost a blessing in disguise that some of these other guys have gotten to play and have gotten a chance to step up, get at bats, get playing time, because later on down the stretch, when inevitably injuries happen again and you get later into the season and you go into a 33-game stretch like they're about to go into, it's so helpful to have those players ready to go, and you know that you can trust them, you know that you can put the bat into McKinney's hand, you can put the bat into Williams' hand, and you know that they're going to be sufficient, if not beneficial, to your team when they're up there. So I think this is the past few weeks have been a good experience for this Mets team in an NL East division that, besides them, has been pretty underwhelming. But like you mentioned, the Braves are going to get better, the Phillies are going to get better, a lot of baseball teams are going to get better as the season goes on. So I think these past few weeks are going to help them. And like any team, as long as you can stay healthy, especially your stars, if DeGrom's able to stay actually healthy and those precautionary pullouts don't end up being, serious injuries, I think as long as you are able to stay healthy, and they're going to continue to get players back. I mean, this is a team that's doing as well as they are without some of their key players. So if I'm a Mets fan, I'm chilling. I'm not worried about anything. So.
Yeah, I mean, just quickly, Kelly, I like what you said about these guys getting valuable at bats right now off the bench, because let's say come September, October, when all the starters are back, hopefully, or at least most of them, and these bench guys resume their role on the bench, they're going to be a lot more ready to come up for a pinch hit, to come up even to pinch run, to play the field defensively late in the game. We know how important that is in October. That can be, or even games down the stretch before the playoffs. That those at-bats, those appearances off the bench are extremely important, especially in the National League with the pitcher hitting. So that's a really good position this bench is in for the Mets, and you got to be looking forward to that division. It's going to be, I think it'll be a tight race. It's not going to be, they're not going to run away with it, but it'll be an exciting time down the stretch for sure.
This is Sam Davis, our Mets beat reporter. He'll be covering Mets Padres tonight as well, and you know what? That might be a preview of the NL wildcard game for all of you know. So thank you so much, Sam, for coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I always love hearing your insight, even though I should probably have the same, but you always put it much better than I do.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
That's Sam Davis, folks. Now, let's talk about the other New York team. Again, as we like to call them in my house. Finally, they get the kind of pitching that is World Series winning worthy for the first time, I think, really since 2009. In Garrett Cole, in Corey Kluber, in all these guys. And then they stop hitting, and this is the worst they've played in 10 years. It is indescribably strange. But, to me, it's an example of, well, no, it's not pitching and defense that wins championships. It's a balance of the two.
Right.
So this is what I've been saying to my father for a long time.
Right.
But so what's interesting about this Yankee team is that, like, it's also not one thing offensively they're struggling with. Like, the Yankees for 10 years have struggled to hit with runners in scoring position. They just can't do it. They walk, they strike out, and they wait for someone to hit a 3-run home run. They are the epitome of an American League team. So with this Yankee team, I don't know where to even start in addressing the problem.
Oh, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I mean, the runners in scoring position is by far, to me, their most glaring issue on offense. I mean, even in this Twins series alone, 2 for 9 with runners in scoring position, with that last game, 5 for 32 overall in the series. And they've just, across the season, they've hit 224 as a team with runners in scoring position. And to win a baseball game, you got to score runs. You got to score runs. At the end of the day,
That's a really hot take right there. I appreciate that you said that.
Oh, it took me a while to get the nerves to say that one on camera. But, they need to find a way to do it. And I think you started to see them try and start to play small ball in this series. A lot of their runs were scored off of fielder's choice and balls that just got through the infield. They were hitting the ball more in the ground than in the air. So they did find a way to scrap some runs across, but that was against the Twins. Like, I can't stress that enough. Like, this is not going to be the best team they play. So they're going to have to find a way to make things happen. I mean, this is an offense that has the personnel that they should be able to do that. Gleyber Torres, DJ LeMahieu, Brett Gardner, they've all struggled, but they're all hitters who should be able to do that. They should be able to get runs across. And yeah, this is also a team like the Mets that have dealt with injuries. Giancarlo Stanton, Luke Voigt, he's only played in 12 games, and that has really showed a hole in their depth chart at first there. Aaron Hicks is out for the year with wrist surgery. So they do need to go and look for long-term answers to those problems, but you got to score runs. You're right. And a pitcher can only do so much. If they hold a team to 1 run, 2 runs, and their offense doesn't do anything, so what? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at the end of the day.
I call it the Jacob deGrom issue, quite frankly, because before this season, this is all that ever happened to him. But I'm not mad about it. So with this Yankee team, like we've been saying, it's difficult to, as much as they've been struggling to hit with runners in scoring position, that is not their only offensive issue. But what doesn't make any sense is, as you mentioned, these are hitters. This is not a team that is gripped for power. They have it. They've got it. All down the lineup, all 9 guys could hit a home run at any time. The problem is they're not doing that. So I'm personally of the belief, I don't know about you, Kelly, but a lot of people will say you can't just hit home runs and expect to win all the time. I see no reason why that can't be true, quite frankly. If you're hitting home runs and you're winning games, who cares how you're winning the game? You can play small ball? Okay, as long as you keep hitting home runs. The problem with this Yankee team is they're not hitting home runs.
Exactly. Their power's down, and this is 2021 baseball. Home runs are huge in this game. I mean, if you don't hit home runs, you're not going to be successful. And whether you think the league is doing things with their balls to make that happen, whatever, that's a whole nother conversation. But you're right. The power has been down. I think DJ LeMahieu, I've mentioned him a few times. I think he's a prime example of that. I mean, he just signed a 6-year, $90 million contract. And since then, he has not been able to hit for power. I mean, you look at next gen stats, his power percentages are so down. His hard hit rate has slipped significantly. All those next gen stats that I don't usually like to look at too much, but you're right. They're not hitting the ball for power, and it's really hard to score a lot of runs if you can't do that. I mean, if you string together a couple infield hits, you have a runner on first and third, and then what? Eventually someone's got to hit the ball in the air. Someone's got to hit a ball for power, and you saw a little bit more of that in this Twin series. So hopefully, hitting is so contagious. So hopefully they're able to continue that on and build off of that, and maybe sometimes if you're in a slump, just if you can hit 1 home run, that's enough to break it. If you can get 1 good hit, all of a sudden you start seeing the ball again. So this Yankees team, I guess really they just have to hope that they build off of their success against the Twins into the coming games. But yeah, they got to hit home runs. Gary Sanchez he had a home run. I think Andujar had back-to-back home runs this week. So there were some bright spots. Stanton, I think, had a 3-run home run Thursday, and that was off of J.A. Happ, so that was pretty cool. So they have the personnel to do it. They just have to do it. They have to continue to find the ways to do it, and especially considering how good their pitching staff is. I mean, Garrett Cole, assuming that all this talk about spider attack and all the sticky substances, assuming that doesn't affect him too much, their pitching is going to be solid. So it's going to come down to hitting the ball.
Well, hopefully for the Yankees' sake, they figure things out soon. But let me ask Kelly, what is the latest point where the Yankees in the season can figure this out and still contend in the American League? It's a weak league, but it's overperformed.
It's overperformed. The Red Sox. I'm a Red Sox fan, so I've had a great season being a baseball fan. I mean, the Red Sox have been awesome. Verdugo had a walk-off last night, but the AL East has been very strong. The Rays have been strong. I'm somebody who hates looking at things too early and panicking, because baseball is the longest season in sports. They play so many games, and I think the Yankees, I wouldn't be surprised if they make a lot of trade moves, especially before the All-Star break. So I think this is a team that, depending on how they handle that, if they go and they're able to pick up some more help, maybe, and if they're able to get healthy and stay healthy, I wouldn't be concerned until very late in the season, because I think this is top to bottom one of the most talented rosters in the MLB. They're just underperforming. So, fans these days are very quick to say, trade this guy. He's not hitting, trade him. He's not pitching well, trade him. Aroldis Chapman has a blown save, trade him. But, no one, Mariano Rivera blew saves. Nobody was like, oh, go trade him. I wouldn't press the panic button too early. But I would say around halfway through the season, if they haven't improved at all, and they don't go in and make some changes to their lineup and go and made some trade acquisitions, then I would be panicked.
Understood. It's a good take. Well, folks, we're going to take another break here on One-on-One. In a little bit, Kayla Wenzel is going to be joining us for headlines, and unfortunately, there's nothing I can do about it. But before that, Alex Wolz, our producer, and I are going to be talking to John Jastremski, host of the new podcast via The Ringer, New York, New York. It's a lot of good show we still have going on, so stick around here on One-on-One.
Be sure to follow WFUV Sports on all of our social media platforms. At WFUV Sports on Twitter, at WFUV_sports on Instagram, and WFUV Sports on Facebook and YouTube. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
One-on-One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show on WFUV 90.7 and all of our affiliates. Dylan Balsamo here again, along with our producer rejoining us again, Alex Wolz. And we are joined by another very special guest today, formerly of WFAN, now a podcast on The Ringer called New York, New York. It's a very fun New York sports podcast, and he's a good friend of WFUV Sports, and we're glad to have him on again. Here is John Jastremski. How's it going, John?
Hey, fellas, what's going on? It's nice hearing that Syracuse, Newhouse guys and FUV guys can, find a way to get along. I mean, it just goes to show you there's hope for everybody out there. And listen, I'll never look at you guys the way I do Georgetown or UConn or now UVA, but I like the fact that FUV and WAER, I mean, those are some badass student radio brands, no doubt.
I feel like the two of us have our two stations have the biggest alumni systems in the business, it seems to me. So I feel like there's a brotherhood there.
I can understand that. And I think for everybody's sake, I'm not going to run through the laundry list of Fordham guys and Syracuse guys. Because, I mean, if you wanted to make that like a drinking game as opposed to us doing a conversation for the next 20 minutes, I'll tell you this. If you and I were going back and forth trying to rattle off Syracuse and Fordham guys and gals in the business, I think we'd be on our rear end in about 5 minutes. Just saying.
Absolutely. So let's get into it. So let's talk about the Yankees. Because for those of you who don't know, we're recording this on Friday afternoon, meaning we're getting off of Thursday's loss to the Twins. 7-5 was the final on that one. They come into the ninth inning, a 5-3 lead. Aroldis Chapman comes in and completely blows it. Now, John, pitching has not been the problem that people have been worrying about for the Yankees this year. But are you alarmed after what happened last night?
Not really with Chapman. I mean, the guy has been unhittable basically for what, 2.5 months. And, I don't care who you are. You're going to have games like this over the course of 162. I think if there's a concern, it would be about his health and the fact that he was only throwing 96 or 97 miles an hour. But again, there are going to be some nights where you just don't get loose, where you just don't have your A stuff and you're not on your A game. And Josh Donaldson, Nelson Cruz, they sent a couple of balls to the moon and ended up being a real lousy loss for the Yankees. And look, you never complain about winning series, but with the Yankees being in the predicament that they're in, the terrible homestand last week, way back at Tampa for first place, back of Boston for one of those wild card spots, you can't mess around. You can't lose games like this. That to me is the frustrating aspect of what happened last night. It's not Aroldis Chapman. It's the fact that you're not in the spot that you need to be. You have a 5-1 lead. You have a 2-run lead with your closer on the mound. That's a game you got to win.
You mentioned how pitching isn't the concern, and I would say the offense is, but it's been the continued point from Aaron Boone that there's bright spots, things are getting better, things are going to start clicking. In Minnesota, they did start to click a little bit with the offense. So let me ask you, are you confident in the offense after what you saw, or are you just looking at, hey, that's not a great opponent, and maybe we can't get too ahead of ourselves here with this team? How are you feeling after the series?
I definitely would not say confident. I would definitely not use that terminology in describing the Yankee offense this year. And I've been critical of Aaron Boone. I've been critical of the offense basically for 2.5 months. I'll give Booney some credit on this, though, in the fact that Gary Sanchez has had better at-bats. Miguel Andujar is a guy who needs to play every day because he's been raking for a week and a half. I hope that is the sign that gets the Yankees going. Stanton's one of those guys. I mean, he gets red hot for 2 weeks, gets hurt, and then can't hit a baseball for 3 or 4 weeks. So you kind of know what you're going to get as far as Giancarlo Stanton is concerned. But before I am like banging my chest and waving the pom-poms that the Yankee offense is back, I got to see more than just 3 games against the Minnesota Twins.
It completely agree. It's going to take a little bit more than that. Again, this is John Jastremski here on One-on-One on WFUV. Now, let's talk about something a little more uncomfortable involving the Yankees, because we saw a very weird thing happen this week with this whole ball doctoring thing happening in baseball. And we all saw the very awkward press conference that Garrett Cole had to do. It made me uncomfortable watching it. But, in fairness, I'm a rather uncomfortable person. So let me ask you, how much does this concern you if you're someone who follows Garrett Cole? Do you think like this is something that would affect him somehow? What do you think of this?
Not at all. Not at all. Because as weird and as bizarre as that presser was, and my concern afterwards was, okay, how was Garrett Cole not prepared for that line of questioning? I don't really care what he has to say. He's not the only guy that's taken advantage of pine tar, spider track, whatever they call this stuff. I don't even know. I mean, I didn't even know what it was until about a week and a half ago. And it's not that I'm this ill-informed baseball fan. I'm just, I'm not putting rosin and pine tar and all that crap on my hat and my arm and whatever. But he went out against Minnesota, pitched great, made Donaldson look stupid, struck out a bunch of guys. he's going to be fine. Okay. Like, I'm just relieved in a way, fellas, that Garrett Cole pitched well on Wednesday night, because if it wasn't the case, I would have had to deal with like Yankee fans in a frenzy, or people who don't like the Yankees basically making the argument, oh, the only reason Garrett Cole's good, the only reason he's dominant is because he's using this substance. And it's just total garbage. It's total nonsense. And the reason Garrett Cole transformed his career, not because of spin rate or spider tack, the fact that he started throwing a lot more four-seam fastballs as opposed to the two-seamers.
And you talk about Yankee fans being in a frenzy. One time they were in a frenzy was after the Red Sox series. We'll go back 1 week here. And you were on the record saying that you think it could have been time for a midseason change with this team when it comes to Boone, when it comes to Cashman, whichever direction you want to go in here. I mean, how much of a hot seat do you think they are on right now, considering where the Yankees stand in the larger division right now in the AL East?
Well, listen, they're obviously not making in-season changes, because if they weren't going to make an in-season change after Sunday, after getting swept by the Red Sox, it's just never going to happen. They were never firing Cashman mid-year. And it's not all Aaron Boone's fault, but there comes to a point where, guys in the last year of this contract, I can't change all the players. Maybe changing the manager is something I could do to spark the team. Neither here nor there. Not the point, because they're not going to change. At the end of this year, though, I have issued this mandate. I don't think it's unreasonable for the Yankees. Get to the World Series. Case closed. If they're not in the World Series this year, in a weak American League, then when is this group getting to the World Series? That, to me, is when you would advocate serious wholesale change. They're not making in-season change. That ship has sailed. But for this group, even though right now it does not look overly promising from a World Series standpoint, got to get there. Because if not, then how many years are you going to just keep running back the same operation saying, oh, we're close, we're close, we're close? Not good enough. Not good enough, especially when you're trending in the wrong direction. So, yeah, the seat is without a doubt hot for Aaron Boone. I don't know how hot it is for Brian Cashman, because he's kind of untouchable within ownership. And I can understand why. He's made a lot of good moves over the years. I think if the Yankees make a change in the offseason, though, guys, I think they would fire the manager. I don't think Cashman's going anywhere. That's just my gut feel.
For the record, it would be rather un-Yankee-like to fire someone in the offseason. Not since the days of Billy Martin have we seen that. But again, we're here with...
No, but I mean, listen, this is the same team, though, that had Joe Girardi one win away from a World Series and didn't bring him back. So they clearly felt like they needed to make a managerial change a few years ago. And listen, I think Aaron's a real likable guy. I think the players like him. I think the Yankee brass loves him. But they have not played better under Aaron Boone than they did under Joe Girardi. That's just a simple fact. And, the nicey nice stuff after the game, guys, I don't know if you feel this way. It's all tough to take. I mean, I can't take it game in and game out, the nicey nice stuff. Enough. I mean, call like it is. When the team stinks, the team stinks. Please.
This is John Jastremski, who's had enough of it here on One-on-One. Now, you talk about changes managerially or general managerially, if that's the right phrasing. But, in terms of in giving a jolt to this team, we could very easily see some kind of move at the deadline. Not what anyone expected coming into this year, but it's very much possible at this point offensively to get another piece. So from your perspective, what should they be going for here?
They need balance in the lineup. They need left-handed bats. So for me, if you can get Ketel Marte, that's the obvious name, it's going to cost you a ton. He would fit the team perfectly. He's athletic. He's a switch hitter. He's got positional versatility. If you want to play him in center, you want to play him in second, he could bounce around. He'd be a great fit, great asset for this team. Peralta with the Diamondbacks, good player. Would love him. Benintendi, former Red Sox, Kansas City Royal. Benintendi would fit this team really, really nicely. So they need lefty bats. I hate when I hear the advanced stats guys try to make the argument to me that, the righties, they'll hit the ball out the other way. Over 162 against mediocre pitching, sure. But when you get into the postseason and you're facing the best of the best who are right-handed, this lineup gets mowed. Why do they get mowed? Because they have too many of the same sort of hitter. So, guys, I would say over the next month, you're right. I don't think a lot of people thought in March, come July, the Yankees' priority at the deadline would be offense and not pitching. But with Severino coming back and Kluber will be back in the fold, and, Herman's been good, Monty's been good, you know what you're getting with Cole. They don't need another starting pitcher right now. They desperately need offensive help. And to me, it needs to be like, I don't want to hear Trevor's story. Okay. Like, he's a terrific player. The Yankees don't need another right-handed bat who strikes out a ton. They need left-handed bats. I can't stress that enough.
And I want to get outside the Yankee vacuum for a second, because you talk about the moves they have to make at the deadline, but I'm really curious. This question I've been wondering a lot, and I think nobody better to ask than you. If you look at where the roster stands right now with the Yankees compared to what's going on the other side of New York with the Mets, you have a team that's dealt with a lot of injuries, still top of the NL East. If you look at those two teams, the way they're constructed right now, who do you think has a higher ceiling in the Major League Baseball?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would have said the Yankees without a doubt before the start of the year. The Mets, though, have something cooking in the fact that they're winning games. They've taken advantage of a soft schedule, and they have a ton of guys on the injured list. Now, the one thing with the Mets is that schedule is going to get a lot trickier over the next 2 months. So I'm still kind of in wait-and-see mode with this team because a lot of guys have been out. That's number one. Number two, they've taken advantage of a lot of bad teams. You don't apologize for it, but who are the real New York Mets? You have DeGrom. That's great. The lineup really has not done much. I mean, we're talking about Billy McKinney. We're talking about Jonathan VR. So, like, from the standpoint of championship window right now, I don't know. I'm going to still stick with my preseason narrative and thought, which would be the Yankees. But right now, to be perfectly frank, I don't think either team is a championship caliber team. I think they're playoff caliber teams. From what I've seen so far this year, I don't think either team is winning the World Series. Could be wrong, but I for one, don't see it.
Again, this is John Jastremski here on One-on-One on WFUV. So then let me ask you, because I think that there were a lot of people who saw both of these teams at least fighting for playoff spots. The Yankees were the American League pennant favorite from the start of the season. But if not them, then even on the National League side too, who do you think is above all here? Because, I think in the National League it's a little more difficult here because there's a lot of teams that are really good.
Well, listen, nobody in the American League wants to give Tampa any credit. Tampa's better than the Yankees right now.
Yeah.
And I don't want to hear all the payroll and who are these guys. They're good, okay? Tampa Bay knows how to win. They know how to find players. The Yankees don't know how to beat them. So, like, anytime I hear the disparaging comments about Tampa Bay, I kind of I'm over it because they just keep churning. Tampa, until I see otherwise, is a better team than the Yankees. In the National League, I can't believe what the Giants are doing. I look up, they're 16 over 500. I'm like, how in the world is that possible? I still think when it's all said and done, though, the National League will boil down to the Los Angeles Dodgers and the San Diego Padres. I think they're the two best teams in the NL. I think that will take shape over the next couple of months. Might have three teams in the NL West playing in the postseason, but yeah, I think Dodgers, Padres, in some capacity, one of those teams going to the World Series.
And I'm right with you there. But one thing I'm really curious about is with the AL East, because coming into this season, there was a lot of narratives about this being a one-team race, being all about the Yankees. Nobody really expecting much from the rest of the teams yet. Boston's looked terrific. Tampa Bay's looked terrific, like you mentioned. Even Toronto fighting. I mean, were we just dead wrong about the AL East coming into this season, or are these teams overperforming? I mean, which do you think it is?
Well, I think Tampa's legit. I think Boston is overachieved. I think Toronto actually can get better. Remember, guys, Toronto is hanging around. They've gotten nothing from George Springer, who they gave this monster contract to. We haven't seen George Springer all year. I think he's had 10 or 15 at bats. I think their lineup goes to another level if he comes back. And the Yankees better be careful with the Blue Jays because they got a young team and they're another team that is not the least bit intimidated playing the Yankees. The Yankees, if they're going to turn this season around, remember this, they got to play better in the division. Look at their record outside of the games against the Orioles, which whoop-de-doo. Red Sox, 0-3. Tampa, terrible record. Toronto, terrible record. You want to go to the playoffs, you got to play better. And, yeah, I think the AL East, Baltimore aside, it's legit.
This is John Jastremski here on One-on-One. Now, let's shift gears here for a little bit before we wrap things up because I'd love to talk about the Brooklyn Nets here. As we record this on Friday, they trail 2-1. They lead the series 2 against Milwaukee. Pardon me right there. Pardon me. Excuse me. Excuse any Nets fans listening. You must pardon my my
One of 5 Net fans listening. There's so many across the tri-state area. They're booming. Let me tell you about it.
So many. A lot of them still here in New Jersey. But let's talk about the Nets. They fell 86-83. I think was the final score last night to Milwaukee. So they still have that series lead 2-1. Is the ceiling for them the NBA championship? Are they as good as advertised?
Offensively, yeah. Because when you have Durant, Irving, and Harden, and I know Harden isn't playing in this series, but when those guys are cooking, and then you got a guy like Joe Harris who shoots as well as he shoots it from 3, how do you guard them? How do you match up with them? So I'm curious to see how Brooklyn, and I think they'll get through this series. They had a terrible offensive night. The fact that game was as close as it was with Brooklyn hitting like 7 threes, that's a bad, bad sign for Milwaukee. Maybe Milwaukee wins another game. They're not winning this series. They just don't have enough firepower. Giannis doesn't shoot it well enough. I want to see how the Nets match up with Embiid and Philly if they get there. I also want to see how they match up with either Utah or Phoenix. But, yeah, I think they're the favorites. I mean, when you got Kevin Durant playing at this level, Kyrie Irving, who's awfully tough to take, but, yeah, is super talented playing at this level, yeah, it just goes to show you the defensive concerns and the chemistry concerns and a lot of this stuff, it kind of goes out the window when you can just shoot and play that sort of style of offensive basketball, especially in this day and age.
And even in a loss, they only held Milwaukee to 86 points. I think the defense is quite all right. I'm with you there. And the one thing I want to ask you is, you said for Game 4, you wanted to see the odds on that before you made a prediction, before you thought how the series was going to go. FanDuel's got Brooklyn at 1.5 right now. Are you taking Brooklyn to win that game and obviously to win the series?
Yeah, I would say I'd lean in that direction. I'm actually checking this right now, guys, because I want to see if the public is absolutely pounding the Brooklyn Nets. My guess would be, as I'm kind of dancing around your question, that the public is all over Brooklyn in the game. Let's see here. Yeah, you got 89% of the money coming in on Brooklyn. Went from 1 to 1.5. It is a public side, but I wouldn't go against Brooklyn here in this spot. I thought it was a sucker line in Game 3. The suckers ended up cashing plus money ticket, even though Milwaukee won outright. Yeah, I think Milwaukee just doesn't have the firepower here. I would take Brooklyn.
I think it's a pretty safe choice, and I think Alex would agree with me on that.
I got the Nets going to the finals. I'm not going to mince words here. So
yeah, I don't think Alex is going out on much of a limb by saying
no, it's
not exactly a hot take there, Alex.
No,
Listen, it's smart money. I can't blame you on that.
Hey, guys, I hate to say this, but that Kyrie Irving, pretty talented.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. He's a little out there, but the guy can play. That is true. He can play.
Yeah. No, and you take that over however crazy a player might be. If they're that good, they're that good. Now, this has been a fun conversation. We want to thank John Jastremski again for joining us. You can listen to New York, the podcast via The Ringer. John, thank you so much for joining us.
Fellas, you got it. Anytime.
That is John Jastremski here on One-on-One on WFUV and all of our affiliates over the social media platforms. There's more One-on-One right around the corner, so we hope you stick around. Keep with us.
Be sure to check out all of our latest podcasts on WFUVsports.org or wherever you get your shows, including NFL Friday, Nosebleeds, Pick and Pod, 5 on 3, College Gridiron, and FUV FC. Also, our newest edition, Off the Air, diving into the station's legacy with its most prominent alumni. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics. It's WFUV and WFUV HD, New York. Listener-supported public media from Fordham, the Jesuit University of New York. right here on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVSports.org. This is One on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVSports.org.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kayla Wenzel here with the amazing and talented Kelly Bright and unfortunately her co-host Dylan Balsamo, bringing to you our first headline segment. Guys, on Thursday, the Oklahoma Sooners beat Florida State 5-1 in Game 3 to become 5 times World Series softball champions. NCAA softball has regularly exceeded college baseball television ratings, and this World Series received wall-to-wall coverage, more than I think I've ever seen before for softball World Series. So Kelly, as our resident softball player, how excited were you to finally see your sport in the spotlight?
Oh, it's long overdue, and it's been in the spotlight for at least 10 years now. They've been airing these games, but like you mentioned, this year by far it was the most it's ever been played. I mean, it was prime time a few nights. It was on ABC once, so it's been really great for the sport, and the viewership is there. I mean, it averaged 1.2 million viewers, 10% increase from 2019, and it had the second largest audience on ESPN since the NFL draft in April. So, and that's competing with, you know, the NHL playoffs are going on, the NBA playoffs are going on. So people were watching. As a softball player, I always watch. I'm super invested in it. My teammates and I love watching. We know all the girls' names, but I think this year it was the best year to have everyone else in on the drama, because, oh my God, was it such an exciting series. You had the first perfect game in Women's College World Series history in 21 years with Montana Fouts out of Alabama. You had, like you mentioned, Oklahoma coming in, winning their third in the past 5 years. They have such amazing players in their team. Patty Gasso was awesome. Natty Patty, as some people in the softball world refer to as. But by far, the story of the entire series, of the entire playoffs, was James Madison. James Madison, and more specifically, Odysseus Alexander, who threw 1,057 pitches for the Dukes in the Women's College World Series, and she led them to become the first unranked team to advance to the Women's College World Series semifinals by upsetting Oklahoma, number 1 ranked Oklahoma. So, as somebody who plays at a mid-major in Fordham, to see another mid-major have so much success is so exciting, so great for the sport. Not only, you know, for other mid-majors, but the sport in general. I mean, there were so many people who tuned in because they heard about this girl. They saw her viral plays on social media. And so it's such an awesome thing for the sport.
The storyline of James Madison was just incredible. This was such a fun, exciting College World Series, but you know, I want to touch about something Kayla said. Something Kelly said was that the viewership numbers are there, because I think there's a lot of people who make the argument, I guess, against women's sport. Like I don't even know how to describe it, but what they'll say is that people don't want to watch it. But if the College World Series of softball, no, World Series of poker, College Softball World Series. There we go. If this event has proved anything, it's that those viewership numbers are there. If you air it, people will watch it because it's competitive and it's as good as any sport. It's as exciting as anything. So you look at something like the WNBA, for example. A lot of people will say people just don't want to watch it. But the reason nobody's watching it is because you put it on ESPN2, you put it on ESPN News. What do you expect people to do? If you put it on the main networks, people are going to watch it because it's just as competitive as anything. It's a professional sport. College World Series, it's the best softball players in the country. It bothers me when people say these things, because if you put it on the main networks, people are going to watch it because it's as good as anything.
You know, and I hate to agree with you, Dylan, but you're right. I mean, you're right. It competed, the World Series of softball competed, like Kelly was saying, with the NBA and NHL playoffs, and it still managed to maintain a really strong viewership. And I think that just speaks to the fact that a lot of people who are not even like hardcore softball fans are into this. Like, this is something that appeals to everybody. I used to watch the softball world, like tournaments and stuff, when it was on like ESPN3 on a Saturday morning sometimes, just like hanging out. But some people are not going to be willing to do that. And I think that by pushing these women collegiate sports to like the margins, you're not really giving them an opportunity to flourish like we know that they can. And I mean, the series was just one that was so incredible to watch. And it was so much fun. And the energy that you could just feel from the players, that you could feel coming off of the television screen. I mean, like, it was incomparable. And so I think that, especially by giving them this spotlight, like, I think that this World Series especially has probably changed things for them for the long run, for the future. I think that it has proven that women's softball is something that people want to see. And I think that this is going to give women collegiate softball more of an opportunity to be aired on primetime television and on SportsCenter and on ESPN. So I really think that this was something that was such a great and progressive step in women collegiate softball.
I mean, why do people love sports? Why do people watch sports? They watch because of the storylines, right? Sports are their stories, their dramas, their epics, they're funny, they're heartwarming, they're heartbreaking. And I think this is an example of a situation where fans were able to see those storylines unfold. If one game is being aired, every few weeks, or it's not ever in prime time, then fans don't get to know the players. They don't get to know the stories. They can't fall in love with the game like you can with a sport like football or the NBA or even college basketball. That's an example of college sports where, it's a college sport, but people follow it like as if it's a professional team. So I think this was an example where if you give fans the opportunity to fall in love with these athletes, to follow their stories, to learn more about them, it can receive the viewership and it can receive the following that any other major sport would get. And, I think softball is a great example because it, as you mentioned, Kayla, it supersedes college baseball year in and year out. And that's an equivalent sport, a sport that as a softball player, we get compared to all the time as, isn't softball easier than baseball? Isn't the ball bigger? Isn't the field shorter? But it's a different game. It's dramatic. It's fast paced. I mean, that play that went viral with Alexander when she dives and tags the girl out at home, that was everywhere. LeBron James commented on it. Kevin Durant commented on it. These big time players were like, oh, look at this girl doing her thing out there. Look at this. Like, softball's an athletic sport. These girls are athletes. They're competitors. And they're being talked about, finally at an equal level as their male counterparts. And I think there's still a long way to go. I mean, there was a lot of criticism for some of the ways they handled the scheduling. And some of it was rain, it was weather, you can't control that. But they had the championship game was played at 3 p.m. on a Thursday.
Right.
What other major sport is going to have their championship game at 3 p.m. on a Thursday? That doesn't really happen. And then you had some games that would end at 3 a.m. and then the team would have to come less than 12 hours the next day and play again. So, that goes into the whole conversation of almost broader than just softball, but college athletics in general, and getting those equal opportunities as not only men's sports, but also, these are college athletes, but they are basically playing professional athlete schedules. I mean, they're being asked to do the same types of things that professional athletes are being asked of, and to have them, playing without rest, playing at 3 a.m. and coming back the next morning at 2 p.m. Is that okay? Is that right? It seems like they can do better. It seems like as an organization, the NCAA can do better in that regard. But Kayla, like you mentioned, this is definitely a step in the right direction.
Kelly, I really love the way that you put that specifically about why we watch sports. Something I like to say is that the way I'll usually put it is that what we love about sports is that it's this platform to watch human beings be their most self at all times. And there's nothing people want to see more than that, I like to think. And, as we watch an NFL season where, let's say you're a fan of any team. Let's say you're a New Orleans Saints fan, for example. There's so many platforms to talk about the Saints. Every storyline of every player. You feel a personal connection with them. You can have that in college sports as well. My brother goes to Seton Hall. He's the biggest Seton Hall basketball fan in the world. He knows all these players very well. The men's team I'm talking about. When you give women's sports that platform, the same thing is going to happen. It has nothing to do with the size of the ball or how fast someone can run. These are great things we like to see. That's why we love watching. That's why we love watching athletic events. But what we really enjoy about it are those storylines, like you mentioned, Kelly. Those are the things we watch really anything for. Sports is, we watch sports for the same reason we watch movies, for the same reason we watch TV shows, for the same reason we listen to music. These are human beings living their lives and existing. That's the thing that we root for.
Yeah, and I personally fell in love with the Sooners. I know I wanted James Madison because they were the underdogs, but I really did love the Sooners storyline. I mean, it wasn't easy. They were top seeded, but it wasn't like they just walked into the World Series. They had a really tough time getting there. They had to overcome deficits against UCLA. They lost to James Madison in the beginning. They had to beat them twice to try to get there. So I think that just watching these teams, watching these players work so hard and struggle and try to come up against this and come to the win, that's what I really love to see. And so I like that it wasn't something that was the top seeded Oklahoma Sooners just walked right in there and they had kicked butt and it was easy. No, they had to go to game 3. They had to work so hard to get there. They had to overcome a lot. And I think their coach, her son was getting married or something this weekend. And she was trying to figure out how to get there. And that's what we love. That's what we like. We love the storylines of it and we love following this. And so I think that is something that came to me this season that, like Kelly said, when I've watched them randomly, occasionally, I've never understood it. I never learned about it, never cared enough about the stories because I saw it once a month, maybe, But with this tournament, I was able to become so emotionally invested in the players and in what they're doing and in their personal lives. And that's really all that matters about it.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned Oklahoma. James Madison really has stolen the show in this situation, even though they ultimately lost to Oklahoma. But Oklahoma is the fourth ever team to win a national title after losing in the opening round. That is, you're right, that's very difficult to do. And even in that they pushed their final championship series to game 3. Florida State came out and won that first game. So they really had to come together as a team. They really hadn't had a dominant pitcher all series. And then Juarez came out. She was ultimately the MVP of the finals, and she was just dominant. She's a super senior. Her last year, she won that last game 6-2 and was just unbeatable. Jocelyn Allo hit 4 homers in the World Series, including the go-ahead game winner in game 2. So there was just so much big talent in the sport, and it didn't feel like, people are just pushing women's sports on us to watch women's sports. I mean, we were watching talented players. These were great games. These like you mentioned, these weren't blowouts. It wasn't like one team was just walking all over everyone. Almost every game had an element of drama towards the last few innings. So it's just so exciting. And I'm a softball player, so I'm biased, and I think college softball is one of the best avenues to get into women's sports there is. But it shouldn't just stop with college softball. College soccer, the professional soccer, the women's team, they had an exciting game. They just won against Portugal, and the Olympics are coming up. But other sports,
40th straight win, that's a big deal.
Exactly. And women's basketball for a long time now has been pushing for more viewership. And I think at the professional and college level, that should increase as well, because I think softball is just the beginning for women's sports in terms of a model where putting out more games, giving people more content was effective.
Yeah. And I think that while we've been talking about this, and as softball really has thrived this year, I think that somewhere that we're still lacking in good coverage is Simone Biles and her 7th all-time all-around gymnastics title, which is record-breaking, never been done before. And I saw this on Twitter, and it says SportsCenter's Instagram posted 12 times for Logan Paul and Floyd Mayweather's fight, and they didn't post once for Simone Biles. And I fact-checked this, and it is true. They did not post at all. And so, Dylan, where do you think this comes from? Why do you think that Simone Biles, arguably one of the greatest athletes of all time, I mean, especially in her sport, she's 24, never lost in 8 years. She's unparalleled. I mean, where does this come from where she's still not necessarily getting the credit that she deserves for an incredibly challenging sport like gymnastics?
It's, how do I say this? I don't think it's a purposeful sexism, but it's there. It's an ignorance. It's an ignorance that leads to a purposeful type thing, even if you're not actively thinking about it, if that makes any sense. I know personally, as a sports fan, any sports fan, what you want to see is the great players. Like that's what we keep talking about. Someone like Simone Biles, who is, I would argue a top 5 athlete of the 21st century at this point. It's her, it's Serena, it's Tom Brady, it's LeBron. That's 4.
That's 4.
That's
No,
4. I'll think of a 5th one before the end of the segment. Wow. Okay. But the point is, the coverage is not a purposeful let's not talk about this. It's a blatant ignorance. It's a laziness, quite frankly. And I can tell you as a guy in the sports world, there is a need to step that up a little bit. Sports needs to play its part in making the world a better place. And I think there's a lot of people in sports who feel that sports is an escapist type thing when it's not all the time.
Yeah, I agree with Dylan completely. I think we see this across the board. I mean, we just talked about it with women's sport and softball and that kind of thing. And Simone Biles, she is the GOAT. I mean, she has a GOAT on her leotard when she competes now, and rightfully so. I mean, her dominance in that sport is so underappreciated, how good she really is. I mean, she's 24. Most gymnasts have hit their peak when they're 16, 18 years old. And she is 24 and still doing it. I mean, there's literally no competition. There's a 7-part documentary coming out about her on Facebook soon, and it's called Simone versus Herself, because at this point, she's her only competition. And she holds 25 world championship medals, 19 gold ones, and she's won every senior national championship since she entered the sport in 2013. She is literally the most decorated person in gymnastics history. And ESPN, like you mentioned, Kayla, did not post about her a single time. And that it doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. And what she's doing is cool. It's content worthy. I mean, the gymnastics during the Olympics, people love watching it because it is so impressive what these young women are able to do, what their bodies are able to accomplish. And she's at the peak of that. She has 4 moves named after her. That doesn't happen very often. I mean, it is very rarely that a gymnast gets 1 move named after her, and she has 4, and she just was the first to compete another one. I'm not well versed in gymnastics, but she attempted this crazy move called a Yurchenko double pike, and I guess she's the first woman to ever attempt it. I guess it's only been done in male gymnastics, and the judges penalized her for it.
Yeah.
They thought by her doing it, she was going to encourage other people to try it, and that it would be too dangerous. Now, something I love about Simone Biles is how outspoken she is and how confident she is, because I think that is great for young women to see, especially female athletes, to see someone who's so confident in herself and her abilities. And she was asked about being given that lower score for that move, and she goes, "They're both too low, and they even know it, but they don't want me. They don't want the field to be too far apart, and that's just something that's on them. That's not on me." So she knows that she's going to keep doing it because she can do it, and she's so great at what she does that she's going to push back and she's going to demand more out of her sport. And I think she is such a great role model for not just girls, not just women of color, for everyone. She's a great role model, and because of that, she should be in the media more. She is somebody that, like a LeBron, like any great athlete, like a Tom Brady, that people should be looking up to, that should be held in the same respect as some of those other great athletes.
Yeah, Kelly, it's funny. I had the second part of that quote of that interview where they were like, "Why are you still going to keep doing this move if no one's going to award you for it?" And she said, "Because I can." She can do the move. You know what I mean? Like, why should she lower what she's doing? Why should she stop what she's doing just because people are not going to reward her for it? Like I love about, like you've said, I love about her is that what she does on the 5 apparatuses, like that's for her. She's not doing anything for these judges. Like when she even wears a goat on her leotard, like that's for her. Like she does not care to impress anybody else out there. She's not doing it for the judges. Like she is doing this to battle herself and to be her best. And so I think that her defiant attitude and her spirit of just such resilience is so powerful. And Dylan, I kind of push back, I guess, against what your point. I think you're right in that it is absolute laziness that people are not looking into it. But I also do think it's a little bit of blatant sexism. There's no way that you can look at it. You are going to see that on the news. I saw it on my Twitter feed about Simone Biles. You know what I mean? But I also saw it on my Twitter feed about Logan Paul. But you're going to actively choose to post something about Logan Paul. You know what I mean? And I think that those like active choices, while like, I think that they're both laziness, I also think that they're like purposeful. I think that they are actively looking at a woman who did something and then choosing to disregard it. So, and obviously I don't know that. I can't speak for everybody, but that is my opinion on it. Like, as of right now, that I just feel like at this day and age, there's something purposeful behind that. Like, there's no reason I feel like that people can see that and then choose not to do anything about it. And so I feel like there has to be something like deep-seated that like influences that decision.
You know what? You're absolutely right, and I'm probably wrong about that. I was trying to give the benefit of the doubt there, but you're absolutely right. By the way, I've decided the fifth athlete is Joey Chestnut.
Oh. Joey Chestnut.
Yeah. But anyways, this has been Headlines. Thank you, Kayla, and better luck next time. We got more one-on-one on the way coming up right after this break. We're going to talk a little NBA, because I don't know if you've heard, but there's a team in Brooklyn that might win the NBA title. We're going to talk about it in just a sec. Stay tuned for your one-on-one.
To support the WFUV Sports Department, visit support.wfuv.org to become a member or make a one-time donation. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
It's one-on-one here on WFUV, New York's longest-running sports call-in show, 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, WFUVsports.org, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, maybe. I don't know. Probably. I would bet. It's Dylan Balsamo here along with Kelly Bright. Our headlines person, Kayla Wenzel, is also here back in a little bit. Our producer, Alex Wolz, rocking with us here. It is currently 12:25 in the morning. Happy Sunday to you and all that you love. But let's talk a little NBA basketball here, because the Brooklyn Nets, who, and I don't know if you know this, but they play in New York. They are currently leading, I believe it's 2-1 now after their Game 3 loss to the Milwaukee Bucks. They lead in the series in round 2 of the Eastern Conference playoffs. And, you know, Kelly, even after a loss, I think it was 86-83 was the final score of that game, they still look like the better team.
They did look like the better team, and the Nets are without James Harden, which he's one of their 3 best players, and he is a big reason why they look so good when they're all 3 there, because he's been really unselfish this year, very uncharacteristically unselfish, and he makes everyone's life easier, and he gets Irving and Durant better looks. But also they were just off. And I don't think there's no reason to panic. I mean, Durant had his worst shooting game of the finals, but he's somebody who has always bounced back after that. I mean, he won't have troubles coming back from that. Joe Harris was 1 for 11 overall, 1 from 7 from behind the 3-point arc, which is also very uncharacteristic for him. So I think it was just an off night. And the game was an interesting one. It was a very defensive game, long stretches with no made baskets on either side. So it was it didn't look like a Nets Bucks game. I don't even know what to compare it to, but it was very uncharacteristic. And I think the Bucks low key got away with one here. I don't think the rest of this series is going to be as close. So I don't hit the panic button here. I mean, Jeff Green's also out, and maybe you'll get him back for game 4, game 5, which would also help Brooklyn out significantly. But if I'm a Bucks fan, I'm not happy about that. I'm like, okay, we won a game, but I'm still not thrilled. If I'm a Nets fan, I'm sitting in the backseat, not worrying about a thing.
It was a cheap win. I absolutely agree with you for the Bucks. You know, the Nets looked really out of character. The Bucks were able to win despite Giannis really being out of character. But you know, I even think just even him, the reigning MVP of a full season, it's not enough to beat this team that the Nets have assembled, even without James Harden. It's a lot. And that is why the Nets are the favorite here. It's completely understandable. You know, the Nets are the epitome of a super team. And we've been in this super team era for a while. And you know, not everybody is a fan of super teams, including our friend, Mr. Charles Barkley. Sir Charles, excuse me. Oh, goodness. You also have to bow and curtsy to him when you see him. But Charles Barkley, I believe, was doing press for a charity golf tournament this week. Is that correct, Alex? A celebrity golf tournament, and he was asked about if he's rooting for the Nets here in the playoffs, and this is what he had to say.
I'm rooting against those guys. I think you already know that. KD's a great player, and I think he's a great kid. I don't know him that well, but I'm not a fan of super teams. So listen, if they win it, they win it. But I want to perfectly clear, I'm rooting against those guys. I root against all super teams. That's just the way I'm old school. If I said the other day, if I'd have known you guys were gonna make fun of me for not winning the championship, I would have joined the super team back in my day. Me and Patrick and Karl Malone and John Stockton. But like I say, man, I feel good about my legacy. I'm pretty sure Patrick and John and Karl do. LeBron started this super team thing, and hey, it's the way the game is played now.
You know, I've just been told the name of the tournament that Chuck was playing in, and I've already forgotten it. So I'm going to ask our producer again. What was the name of the tournament? The American Century Championship, it's called. And apparently it's not until a month from now, because I guess Chuck needs a whole month to promote an appearance in a golf tournament. Like he's written a memoir or something. It's a whole press tour. But that's not the topic here. Kelly, like this is a little off topic, but it does pertain to the Nets. So let's discuss it. What are your thoughts on super teams?
I mean, I think there's a lot to dissect here. I mean, this is coming from a guy who once demanded to be traded from the Sixers to the Suns, and then later joined a super team in Houston with Hakeem Olajuwon and Clyde Drexler. So interesting guy to be giving this take. But beyond that, we're talking about, if he's referring to the Nets, he's talking about Nets and KD and all them. The Nets were never a team worth watching until Durant, Harden, and Irving showed up. This is a Nets team that hasn't won a championship. I mean, they weren't a great team. This isn't a superpower team that's been a dynasty for 20 years. This is the first time in a long time they've been good. And still, the Knicks are getting more attention than the Nets are. And the super team itself, I've always found this concept a little funny to me, because it didn't begin with LeBron taking his talents to South Beach, joining up with Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh. You know, you can go back to the 70s. You have Bill Russell's Celtics, Clyde Frazier's Knicks, the Lakers and Celtics rivalry that was in the 80s. I had Hall of Famers on both sides. The Chicago Bulls, Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman. You could argue that that's a super team. So the concept of having good players on an NBA team and coming together and wanting to win a championship, to me, I don't really understand the big deal, the big controversy around it. I mean, if I was playing, I would want to be on a team with the best players too. And there's one thing, I guess you could make the comment about loyalty and not wanting to go and jump ship too soon. But at the end of the day, these players, they want to win. That's why they're in the league. They love basketball and they love winning. So I think these comments were a little out there, a little unnecessary. I don't really agree with them. I think, the Nets did what they had to do to go out and make their best roster they could to go win a championship. And that's what that's what the NBA is all about at the end of the day.
And since when has Charles Barkley been known for making unnecessary comments?
Never.
Like, really? He also, I would argue, joined a super team inside the NBA, but that's a whole other story. I also and there's probably a little part of him that's just jealous he never won a championship, or as he would say, a championship. Now, I had to sneak that in. I also think there's a little problem here with, and this happens in every sport. Basketball is, from my observation, been doing this a lot lately, of older guys and former players trying to gatekeep the sport in some way and gatekeep the way it's supposed to be played. And that just doesn't make any sense to me, because how are you going to stop people from playing with the guys they want to play with? I want to play with my friends too. I don't want to play basketball with strangers. I want to play with my friends. That's to me, that's really what this comes down to. But the reason I bring up gatekeeping of a sport is you look at these three superstars on the Brooklyn Nets. You got Kevin Durant, you got Kyrie Irving, you got James Harden. All three of them are examples of some of the strangest superstars the NBA has ever seen. They are unconventional, they are strange, they're hilarious. And to me, that is part of this culture that the Brooklyn Nets have assembled since they moved to Brooklyn, what was it, 10 years ago now? This is something they built specifically in the last couple of years. So they're odd, but it works. So why do people care?
Exactly. Why? I mean, it's New York. It is New York after all. They love characters, and this New York team has a whole bunch of them. I mean, even some of the lesser players who don't get as much media attention, they're interesting too. I think Bruce Brown's become one of my favorite players in the league. I talk about him on the Pick and Pod show all the time because I think he's just such an interesting story. But you look around the league right now, and the teams that are left are teams that we're not used to seeing at this late stage in the game. I mean, the Philadelphia 76ers, Milwaukee Bucks, Atlanta Hawks, they've never won a championship before. And there's something to be said about that. And most of these teams haven't even been in the finals if they have raised a title before. And it's exciting to see. I mean, look at the Western Conference, Utah Jazz, Phoenix Suns, Denver Nuggets. Are you kidding? Like these teams are teams that haven't even been relevant. Like I used to just make fun of the team names for some of these teams, and now they're playing for a title. So I think this has been good for basketball. And you look at the Brooklyn's big three, and yes, these are some of the three biggest players in the game right now, but they're playing a big three in Milwaukee. I mean, Drew Holiday, the Milwaukee made moves to bring in Drew Holiday to join up with Chris Middleton and Giannis there, and maybe their big three isn't as good as Brooklyn's, but I just don't see a big problem in doing what they're doing. Sean Marks, he had to build a functional roster, and he did so with three players consuming more than 60% of their payroll, and that's, tip your hat to him. That's his way of managing a basketball team, and it's been successful so far. And it's the same thing as teams who go and try and make that happen by taking risks on draft picks. So it's just how they've managed the team, and if they're able to win a championship, hats off to them.
Definitely fair game to make fun of the name Jazz as a basketball name. Now, this is a little off topic, but I want your opinion on this. And folks at home, I also want your opinion. So write in somehow. I'm at DP Bolsums on Twitter. What is the plural of Jazz? If you play for the Utah Jazz, are you a Jazz?
Well, I have never thought about this, but would you just be a Jazz, or would you be a jazz singer? Are we
a Jazz? Yeah, no, the Miami Heat, as our producer Alex Wolz just pointed out, the same way. To me, if you play for the Jazz, you should be called the name of a famous jazz musician. Yeah, I'm a Coltrane. I'm a Bird. I'm a Miles. That's how I would approach it.
So if that's how you're approaching jazz, how would you approach the Heat?
Different stars in the solar system is how I would approach that. But there's one other team that's like that too, and I can't remember off the top of my. The Magic, different Disney characters, obviously. And then the Tampa Bay Lightning in the NHL. I think you just have to be different famous superstorms. like a Sandy or Marie or something like that. That one needs work. I'm gonna workshop that one a little bit. But anyway,
I have some PR issues with that one.
Exactly. But so anyways, these Utah Jazz are the number 1 seed in the Western Conference. And, you look at the rest of this outlook, as you mentioned earlier, for the rest of these NBA playoffs. You got the Nets, they're leading Milwaukee 2-1. Philly's up on Atlanta, and that's the rest of the Eastern Conference. And then you got Utah, you got the Clippers, you got the Nuggets, and you got the Suns in the West. If you ask me, I think the Nets are the favorites to win this title. Am I crazy in just outright saying that, or is everybody thinking this as much as I am?
I don't think you're crazy at all. In fact, I think that's probably the most common perception of at this point. The Nets have the most well-known players besides maybe the Clippers, but they've been pretty disappointing so far. They're trailing the Jazz 2-0, Game 3 tonight. Game 3 probably actually over by the time you're watching this, but the Jazz have been impressive. Donovan Mitchell has been one of the most elite offensive talents. He's been the talk of that series, not Kawhi Leonard, Donovan Mitchell. The Suns, to me, have been a very impressive team. I believe if it's not the Nets, I think the Suns are the next best option. I think they've been incredibly talented. Devin Booker, Chris Paul, DeAndre Ayton, they just have those three have just been playing lights out. They haven't had a bad game in God knows how long. So I think they might be the biggest challenge to the Nets. I think the Nets are going to come down to, if they get Harden back, they're not losing. They're just not losing. If they don't get Harden back, then maybe there's some questions whether or not between KD and Kyrie, if they can, isn't that crazy that we're asking that? Between Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, are they going to be good enough to win a finals? But if they're without Harden, are they going to be able to, maintain the success? But I think you're more than right to make that prediction. I think that's not a hot take at all. I think that's a pretty well shared take, and I would have to agree with you on it.
So you really turned that into an insult, and I appreciate that. But so anyways, I completely agree with you that I think the Suns are the best team in the West. They're blowing by the Nuggets. They blew by the Lakers. It was just to me, it's nobody else in the West. I think that the Sixers might give the Nets trouble in the Eastern Conference Finals, presuming that they meet there. But to me, the Nets are the favorite there too. My only worry about the Nets is, when they traded for James Harden in, was that late mid-January, something like that, right? The window of winning closed by about 5 years, I would say. It went from you got 7 years to win it to it's either this year or next year. And you can look at past playoff teams before that have been super teams. Sometimes that pressure is just a little too much. It can be too much to handle, and emotionally, it's just not sustainable. Now, you can also look at examples of teams that has not been a problem for. But the Nets, specifically, I think in the next month, are going to have a lot of people talking about them a lot. So I worry about that. But nevertheless, I do take them as my NBA champion here.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, one that I hadn't really considered, to be honest. And that is the thing. They are kind of in this win now mentality. They're paying these guys a lot of money to be there. They made some crazy moves to put together the roster that they have right now. And I think there's also a few other teams here. The Utah Jazz is another example. This is a win now mentality for them as well. It's got to be either this year or no year. Even the Clippers, arguably, they haven't been successful in the postseason with the lineup they have right now. And you got to think Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, what else are they missing that they can't somehow get out of the second round of the playoffs? So there are a lot of teams that have that pressure, that extra pressure on them, and the Nets are one of them. But I think if one team is able to overcome that pressure, it is going to be the Brooklyn Nets. And I think it's interesting with the Suns is that I don't think they have that pressure at all. I think they are such a young team. They're such a young core, and no one really expected. I mean, a lot of people knew they were going to be good, but I don't think anybody truly expected them to be where they are now. So I think that's an example of a team that really doesn't have a lot of pressure on them. I mean, they're having fun, and it looks like it. So I think that would be a really exciting matchup to see in the finals, the Suns and Nets. And I think I'm not ready to pick one over the other, but I am leaning towards you, Dylan. I'm leaning towards the Nets.
It is about 19 minutes to 1 here on One on One. We are very grateful that you've stuck with us through this, and we hope you stick around. Right, coming up after this break, we're going to have another segment of headlines with Kayla Wenzel because I guess one just wasn't enough. We'll be right back here on One-on-One. Stick around.
Be sure to follow WFUV Sports on all of our social media platforms. At WFUV Sports on Twitter, at WFUV_sports on Instagram, and WFUV Sports on Facebook and YouTube. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
I'm Kayla Wenzel, back again for another round of headlines, much to Dylan's dismay. But this time we're discussing the possible expansion of the college football playoffs, moving to a possible 12-team format. So what this would mean is that the bracket would include 6 of the highest-ranked conference champions and then 6 remaining champions as determined, or 6 remaining highest-ranked teams as determined by a selection committee. So Kelly, what do you think about this new move, about this expansion? Do you like the possibility of this? Do you dislike the possibility of this? Give me your thoughts, Kelly. Not Dylan, only Kelly.
First of all, I just want to point out, I feel a little bit like a child of divorce right now. I can't understand really what's going on, but I'm just going through it. But back to the more relevant conversation at hand, I think this is a very interesting change, and it's one I didn't see coming because this is a governing body that doesn't make drastic changes, and when they do, it takes a very long time for them to do so. But there's a lot of questions here, but for me, overall, it's a good thing. I think, especially for Group of 5 conferences, the American Athletic Conference, Conference USA, the MAC, Mountain West, Sun Belt, they are going to have an opportunity to have a seat at the table, and that's what they've been asking for a long time. I mean, you look at number 8 Cincinnati from this past year, number 12 Coastal Carolina. They would have had a chance to get into the field as conference champions ahead of producers Alex Wolz team, number 25 Oregon. So it gives these other teams a better chance. And I think anytime you open the door up for more teams to be involved in the postseason, I think that's just better overall for the sport and for football and for fans of those teams that maybe haven't gotten as many chances. I mean, there's always been an access problem in college football. When you get towards the playoff, it's pretty much the same teams year in, year out. And so for me, I think that's one reason why this could be a good thing.
Well, first off, Kelly, I want you to know, I know it's strange, but it's not your fault, okay?
Yeah, this has nothing to do with you, Kelly. We
I
didn't
just
mean
want
to
to make
involve
sure
you
you
in
know
our
this
problem.
is between Kayla and me. But so anyways, I'm all for expanding the college football playoffs. I was perplexed that they only started with 4. That never made too much sense to me. 12 seems like a good enough number for now, I guess. I see no reason why they couldn't have done 16, but that's okay. But for me at least, if I read the proposal correctly, is that they wanted conference champions to get a bye past the first round, no matter where they were ranked nationally. Meaning, like I saw someone bring up the example the other day on Twitter where, let's say you look at Notre Dame's undefeated regular season of 2012 before they met Alabama in the national championship. They were the number 1 team in the country. They would not have gotten a bye because obviously they're not in a conference. And teams that were ranked well below them would have gotten a bye past that first round. Now, one might argue that that's just a way to try and convince Notre Dame to join a conference. But, regardless, there are issues here. And I also think another important issue is that I think there are people in college football that think that expanding the playoffs are going to fix their disparity issue. That's going to fix the Alabama, Ohio State, maybe one other team every once in a while, and then everybody else issue. This is not going to solve that. All it's going to do is just give those other teams more games to play. Now, there's no problem with giving other teams the national exposure that, most basketball programs will get during March Madness or something like that. But if you really want to go about fixing the issue of why are Alabama and Ohio State winning all the time, and Clemson, I'm forgetting Clemson. This is not the way of fixing that. So I'm all for an expanded college football playoff, but if they want to solve that problem, it's going to be a little bit harder than that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it does create more meaning for some of these teams later on in the season. It's not okay, we know come November who's going to be in these in the playoffs, I think it does kind of create keeping the fans sort of interested longer because there is still some more possibility, some leeway, a little bit of suspense in who the 12 will be. But like you said, Dylan, I mean, it pretty much doesn't really touch anything actual. And the SEC still is going to reign supreme, even though they're going to have a lot of different conferences maybe in this playoffs. It doesn't really seem like it's going to touch the main issue of championships. I just think that while this is good, and I think it gives more exposure to a couple little teams, and I think that it keeps maybe fans more interested because some seasons are now still relevant later on, come the playoffs, like Dylan has said, and it hurts to agree, but I just don't think that it's going to really touch anything in the long run. So it'll be fun for these guys to be in the playoffs, but do any of them have a legitimate chance? Probably not,
Right. I think that's definitely a fair point. I mean, if you look, I think I read an article somewhere that if this system had been in place for the past 7 years, over half the bids would have gone to the SEC and Big Ten. So, like you mentioned, maybe not a large difference. Yes, it would give some teams an opportunity to be in that playoff picture where they may not have otherwise gotten it. But you're right. These other conferences, these SEC, Big Ten, they're so massive and they have so much power in college football that they would just have more teams in the playoff. But there's some other interesting things to look at this potential setup. Injuries is one thing. This would put some teams in a situation where they're playing 16 or even 17 games in a season, and these are college athletes who aren't getting the same level of nutrition, sleep, and attention that professional athletes who play that same amount of games are getting. So you have those kind of questions, and like we mentioned with softball earlier, there's already questions where you draw the line between an amateur athlete and a professional athlete, and I think this is going to bring more of those questions, especially should a player get injured playing 17 games in a season. So there are those questions. I do like I'm not sure, I don't remember which, I think Kayla, you made this point. It does add more emphasis.
It was definitely me.
Well, no. I mean, maybe it could have been me.
I really don't want to take sides, but you mentioned a point about how these games later on in the season will have more emphasis. And I think one thing that will benefit is conference championship games, because I believe in this potential playoff, if you win one, you get a first round playoff bye, and that could be really big for some teams. So maybe just having more emphasis in those conference championship games. I mean, I can think, not off the top of my head, but I know there's been a few games where a team in a conference championship game somehow got lucky almost and made it to that championship game and could have had the opportunity to upset the favorite. And then they would find themselves with a bye in the first round of the playoffs. So that could put a lot more emphasis on those conference championship games, which is not only better for the teams and the players, but also for the fans, for students at those games, for the colleges themselves to host a conference championship game and have it mean something. That's definitely going to help. It's not going to hurt revenue for sure. So, I think there's still a lot they can weed out here and figure out. Notre Dame's a big question. What are you going to do with Notre Dame? Like that's a huge question they're going to have to answer, but I can see positives and negatives. I can see both sides.
Kelly, it's actually, at least for me, it's almost something I forget to think about is what you bring up is the health issues for players. Because I think there's a lot of people in the sports world, myself included most of the time, that like love the idea of college football where it's all of these teams and having a playoff for 120 teams or whatever it is just so is very mathematically stimulating and exciting. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I think there's like, I remember when I was like 13 or 14, I tried to go about fixing the problem myself and realigning the conferences and creating a tournament. And you know what? I must say it was pretty good. But then I showed it to, I showed it to my dad, and he was like, these are college players. I was like, are like, this is too much emphasis here, too much emphasis on the championship. And I was like, oh, you know what? He's absolutely right. He's completely right. So that's something that I think sports fans tend to forget about, is that, it's one thing to be in a 16-team tournament, as I mentioned earlier. But you got to pass Spanish. So there's a levity there that needs to be remembered.
I mean, yeah, I think that's also something that I forget about though too. Like, as not being a collegiate athlete, I forget about the actual like wear and tear physically that's going to take on your life, and that toll is really going to leave on you. So in theory, to me, as a viewer, as a fan, I like the idea, but I understand that perhaps as an athlete, maybe it's not entirely the most fun thing for you guys to also be going through, But kind of moving over now into the professional football world, into the NFL here, Aaron Rodgers continues to kind of just keep up this drama, and he's sticking to his guns here. He did not attend mandatory minicamp this week, which means that he's now subject to $93,000 in fines. So Dylan, do you think he's even going to come at all this summer? Is he just going to not show up whatsoever? Or is he going to make an appearance? Is he going to waiver on this? He's going to falter? I don't know.
Now, so here's the thing. This is not the first time in the last, I would say, 5 or so years that we've seen a big star in the NFL just skip summer practices or the preseason because they don't like the state they're in, whether it's in contract extension or they don't want to play for the team anymore. A lot of the times it doesn't work out for the player. But none of those players have been Aaron Rodgers. Do you get what I'm saying? So like there is a certain amount of respect this league has for Aaron Rodgers. And I think a lot of people are very upset that the Packers are not showing that to him. And I think if anyone has the power to really kind of go wherever he wants, whose name doesn't rhyme with Schlam Schmady, it's Aaron Rodgers. So, I don't know if we're going to see him at all this summer. I don't know if we're going to see him before September, but I have all the faith in the world. He's going to wind up in a place where he wants to play and is happy playing. He's going to win.
Listen, you mentioned Schlam Schmady or Tom Brady as I or the GOAT.
No, I was actually talking about Ham Grady. That's who rhymes with that.
Well, I'm talking about Tom Brady, and okay. I think he's a prime example of an NFL star quarterback who was unhappy in his situation and was able to go to a new team. The new team basically got him whoever he wanted, and then he won a Super Bowl. So if I'm Aaron Rodgers and I see that happen to somebody who I get compared to all the time, I'm thinking, why can't I do the same thing, if not more? And those two players get compared all the time. And I think you mentioned this is Aaron Rodgers. He is one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. He's not the GOAT, but he is one of them. And if he's unhappy, I think he might have the power to make changes, whether that means he's traded to another team, he ends up on another team, or it means the Green Bay franchise itself looks internally about what can they do to make him happy. Whether that's, he keeps saying it has nothing to do with the draft pick of Jordan Love, and maybe it doesn't, but whether it's going out and finding him better weapons, whether it's reevaluating the culture that they have, because it seems like it's kind of an in-house culture problem that he alludes to in a lot of his interviews. I'm not sure exactly what that is, but whatever problems he is giving for the reason of him skipping out on training camp practices, that kind of thing, they need to sit down and decide, is it worth changing to keep their star quarterback? I mean, you can't expect him to sit around forever. He's done so much for this organization. He's been so loyal, but he's watching other quarterbacks go out and make things happen to themselves, get treated the way they deserve to be treated. And I think he's fully in his right to demand the same. Whether or not that happens, that's a whole nother conversation. The Green Bay Packers, their front office has been pretty adamant that they're not going to trade him, but it's also June. It's also June. Come season time, come September, if he's still not playing, if he's still not participating in practice, are they going to be forced to fold their cards in, and do whatever he's asking?
Yeah, I think right now it's definitely like a stalemate, and they're just like staring at each other and seeing which one is gonna, it's like a game of chicken, which one is gonna like bulk first. And so I feel like, I don't know, I feel like the Packers organization is not necessarily showing that they're willing to give like any leniency right now. Like, it doesn't seem like they're moving in any direction to really change anything. Like, I guess I could be wrong, I could be misinformed, but my perception of it as of right now is just that they're not really they're saying that they're trying to fix some stuff, but I don't really know what that actually means. Like, what does that actually mean for Aaron Rodgers? But it doesn't seem like they're going to trade him anywhere else. And it doesn't seem like Aaron Rodgers wants to play with them regardless. So they're kind of at this weird point where it's like, I bet you they're thinking that like, okay, Aaron Rodgers is going to want to play. He's going to because he's an athlete and he's a competitor. Competitor, and he's going to want to play. And so I think that they're probably assuming that he's going to just come back to them because they know he's going to want to be a part of this, and they know he's going to want to be in this season. And so I think that the Packers organization is kind of holding out for Rodgers to fold, but I don't know that he will. So maybe they're just going to be stuck this whole time just staring at each other and seeing which one is going to do something first. And in that case, Rodgers is the one who loses.
It's a good point you bring up, Kayla.
But, oh my God, thank you, Dylan.
That took a lot for me to say, but I immediately regretted it.
I'm glad you got the words out.
But at the end of the day, I understand that point, but I just have more faith in Aaron Rodgers than that. I think whatever happens is going to be to his benefit. This league cares about him too much. Do you know what I'm saying? Like the league knows that he is really kind of on the market right now in some kind of way. He doesn't want to play in Green Bay anymore. Whether or not the Packers are not moving, I think Aaron's going to be just fine.
What do you think the league is going to do? Like, what does that mean? That was so vague.
Well, no, I don't mean the league as in Roger Goodell is going to be like, I demand that.
Yeah, like
that does kind of
the league loves Aaron Rodgers. People love Aaron Rodgers, but that doesn't matter.
People love him. He's so popular. No, I feel like things are going to turn out just fine for him. He is too good of a player to not have a team to be playing for come the time kickoff of the regular season. So it wouldn't make any sense. It just wouldn't make any sense to me.
I mean, I think that that's possible, but I just don't know.
Okay, well, that's just your opinion, Kayla. So.
It's true, but that was just your opinion, Dylan.
Fair enough.
There are a lot of teams though that could potentially be very interested in Aaron Rodgers, as they should be. And I think there's a lot of good fits for him. The Denver Broncos, I think the Panthers, Teddy Bridgewater, Sam Darnold. Like they haven't had any solid quarterbacks, and I don't think Sam Darnold's going to be the answer. He wasn't for the Jets, so I think that's an option for him. The Saints, even the Raiders, the Eagles. There are a lot of teams right now who don't really have an answer at quarterback, and if they reach out to Green Bay with a good enough offer, maybe they'll be forced to give in and take the weapons that they can take and use Jordan Love as the guy of the future. I mean, Aaron Rodgers was in this situation once with Brett Favre. Brett Favre was sitting out games, and Aaron Rodgers was the one who they were giving chances to in training camp. So who knows? Maybe Jordan Love is the future. I'm not too confident in that, but if they're given the right offers and Aaron Rodgers isn't willing to compromise, then maybe that's the avenue they're going to be forced to go.
Dylan, you're muted, man.
I was actually waiting for you to talk, which is I was.
Yeah, now you're blaming on me
Like-
that you didn't unmute your mic.
Because what I was going to say was, we've given you another headline segment. I hope you're happy. That's Kayla Wenzel, folks. We'll be back with more one-on-one in just a second. We're going to talk to a minor league voice and a new voice in the Mets radio broadcast booth. Gregg Caserta talks with me and our producer, Alex Wolz, in just a second. We've got more one-on-one right around the corner, so stick around.
Be sure to check out all of our latest podcasts on WFUVsports.org or wherever you get your shows, including NFL Friday, Nosebleeds, Pick and Pod, 5 on 3, College Gridiron, and FUV FC. Also, our newest edition, Off the Air, diving into the station's legacy with its most prominent alumni. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics. It's WFUV and WFUV HD, New York. Listener-supported public media from Fordham, the Jesuit University of New York. Right here on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVsports.org. This is One-on-One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVsports.org.
We're back here on One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show. It's Dylan Balsamo here again, along with my friend, our producer for the day, Mr. Alex Wolz. And we are joined by a special guest today. We've been talking about the Mets a little bit. We're going to talk about them a little more. And who better to talk to him with? Broadcaster for both the Buffalo Bison and the Trenton Thunder, oddly enough. Who knows how he pulls that off? We're going to ask him about it. He's also filled in on New York Mets broadcasts on CBS Radio, filling in along with Ed Coleman, talking with Wayne Randazzo on Friday and Saturday during their Padres series. He's also a former Marty Glickman Award winner at this very institution, at this very radio station. This is Gregg Caserta. Hi there, Greg.
Well, guys, it's been great. Thanks for the intro. I'll talk to you in a couple of months. And honestly, the fact that you started with special guests, I don't know if I've ever gotten that before. I graduated, believe it or not, in 2010. That was the year I won the Glickman Award. So anytime I get to come back on and talk with you guys, it's great. This is our first time seeing each other. So I'm always excited to contribute to the cause. Obviously, you guys know how much I love WFUV and what it meant to me. So it is great to be with you today.
Oh, we're glad to have you here, and it's excellent to meet you. So let's start off with this first question here, because we mentioned it a little bit before we started recording this. You are currently calling games for both the Trenton Thunder and the Buffalo Bison. Now, I'm no travel expert, but those places are rather far away from each other. Can you explain to us how that works?
All right, so here's what we got. So it was back in, I guess it was early April, and talks were ongoing between Trenton and Buffalo, simply because the Canadian border has been restricted to reopen because of COVID. In particular, in Ontario, Toronto is getting hit harder than any other city. And so the Blue Jays knew that they were not going to be returning to Toronto, at least for the early portion of the season. So what they did was they were going to stay down in Dunedin, open up the season at the team spring training facility, and then come June 1st, they were going to relocate to Salin Field in Buffalo, which is where their AAA team is located. For the second straight year, the Toronto Blue Jays would be playing in Buffalo. This year, with a minor league season, the AAA Buffalo Bisons needed a home, and the Trenton Thunder had that home. So while they're on the air at home, I call them the Trenton Thunder because of licensing and things like that. When I write my game notes and my game recaps, it has to say Buffalo Bisons. And I'm making it a little more confusing here on Zoom because I've got a Thunder roll or a Thunder pork roll hat and a Bisons workout shirt. So we've all kind of embraced it. The two front offices have been great working with each other. My relationships with the people up in Buffalo, the media relations and broadcasters, has been terrific. And yes, while it's not a traditional partnership, it's one that has been very nice so far in 2021.
And then let me ask, how's the minor league season been like calling it for you so far? Obviously, last year, the minor leagues were a bit of a casualty of the pandemic, and now getting fans back and the season back. What's that experience been like so far?
It was like we never left. Obviously, the thing that really stinks, guys, is that because of certain restrictions with Tier 1 employees, I am not supposed to be down in the clubhouse, which for me is one of the best places to be. I can't be in the clubhouse. I can't be on the field during BP. That is the best prep time for me. And it also allows me to get a chance to know our players and our coaches. So the fact that I haven't been able to do that, I've had to learn these guys and get to know them from afar, which can be frustrating. But in terms of the overall fan experience, I mean, Trenton Thunder Ballpark now, because of New Jersey, is completely reopened. We're at full capacity. Masks are optional. I think people are still a little hesitant to make their way out into public places. I just think that a lot of people got trained to stay home and have their guard up at all times. But yeah, it's been great. Obviously, having a year off, it makes you appreciate these things a little bit more. And the only drag, I think, this year is the 6-game series. I think that by game 4, 5, and 6, you get sick of seeing the same team. I think the players get sick of seeing each other, and the managers get sick of the same umpiring crew. So I'm not a huge fan of the 6-game series, but I do like having every Monday off. So that's been a plus.
That adjustment is rather difficult. Again, we're here with Gregg Caserta here on One-on-One, New York's longest running sports call-in show on WFUV. Now, speaking of adjustments, we talk a lot about the adjustment that ball players have to make jumping from the minors to the majors, but we never talk about that with broadcasters. And it's something you had to do basically this past weekend, calling games for the Mets radio broadcast when they were in San Diego, filling in for Howie Rose for a little while. So let me ask you, what was that adjustment like for you?
Well, the big thing was obviously, guys, them being in San Diego, I had to call the games off the monitors at Citi Field. And I had a kind of jaded view of that going in. I did not think it was going to be a pleasurable experience. I knew that certain broadcast crews had complained about some of the logistics of it. There are some technical difficulties that pop up from time to time with video and audio feed not corresponding. But to be honest with you, I loved it. I felt like I was in my living room watching a game. So for me, that was great. Charting pitches was made easier because you're watching the center field cam instead of being behind home plate. But then when you think about the larger scope, you got to realize that it's no different. It's the same game. I've done several hundred minor league games. This one was no different. Obviously, the stakes are raised. A lot more people are listening. And on Friday night, I saw Blake Snell. Saturday night, I saw Jacob deGrom. So the names are a lot higher profile, but in terms of the nuts and bolts, it's no different. And by the time I got into first pitch on Friday night in that first game, I felt very comfortable, and I couldn't have been happier with the way it went.
And then I think for you specifically, obviously, we talk a lot in broadcasting about the importance of working your way through the minor league ranks. Is where a lot of broadcasters start. And, everybody kind of has a different beginning, but that was a lot of it for you, was calling a lot of minor league games, working your way up. So just how fulfilling is it for you starting kind of at the one point in the minors, at the lowest level, and getting all the way up to calling a major league game?
It's the ultimate dream. I mean, it's everything I've been working for. This is something that started, it's easy to say, well, it started in 2011, my first summer doing a minor league baseball game, but it was 2011 in a collegiate league. 2012, I was in independent baseball. So my first year in affiliated wasn't until 2013. And at one point I lived in 6 states in 7 years. So there was a lot of traveling. There were sacrifices that were made with family and friends. My now fiance has been with me from the beginning, but if you go back even further, if you want to call it the journey, and I really don't like when people say that, but I guess it is that. It started in 2006, my freshman year. So it's a culmination of a lot of hard work. It's the culmination of a lot of dark days when you feel like giving up and rolling over and you just continue to get yourself off the mat. it was rewarding for me and my family. When I told my parents that it happened, I broke down on the phone. I thought about a lot of the dark thoughts, especially this past year plus when nobody really had anything positive happen. And if you had this conversation with me back on March 11th, I was a guy that felt like he was dead in the water and he was drowning. Now on June 11th, right now I still feel on top of the world. So it's amazing how things can change, but it took a long way to get here.
Absolutely. Again, we're joined by Gregg Caserta here on One-on-One, New York's longest running sports call-in show. Now, Greg, let's talk a little bit about this Mets team, because, we've talked a lot on our one-on-one episodes these past couple of weeks about trying to figure out how this Mets team is in first place. Decided that there's a certain spirit of this team that cannot be described by any statistic, that is leading them to this success. What do you think that is?
I think you got to start with Luis Rojas. I think that for a lot of the criticism that he received last year in the shortened season, and of course the circumstances in which he inherited the job were not ideal, I think he's kept a really level head. And when you look at the injuries that this team has dealt with, and you're talking huge names in the lineup, you're talking Carrasco, you're talking Syndergaard getting delayed in his return from Tommy John surgery. There are days when you look at that lineup and you go, are you kidding? Like that, you're rolling out with that? It's a 4A lineup. And, what also helps them is the fact that the National League East this year has been very, very underwhelming. I think the Phillies kind of have been playing to expectations. The Braves are the biggest surprise. They might be the biggest disappointment in baseball this year, along with the Twins. So it's opened the door for them. But I think this group has done an unbelievable job bringing guys in. You think about Peraza and guys like that, Billy McKinney, who started the season in Syracuse and is now getting regular at bats. Listen, when you have the best pitcher in baseball, that certainly sets the tone, but you're only getting him every fifth day. So I give the group a lot of credit because it hasn't been the easiest situation dealing with all these mounting injuries. And yet here they are, a first place team on June 11th.
You talk about them having the best pitcher in baseball. So let's put DeGrom's season in perspective a little bit. Jacob DeGrom, obviously the incredible .62 ERA. He's been unhittable the whole year, and all these conversations about substances and this, that, and the next thing, he's been on top of all of that, just going out there and pitching and doing an incredible job. I mean, what do you make of what you've seen from DeGrom and how it compares to other great seasons of pitching that you've seen before?
So during Saturday night's game, when he was getting into the seventh inning, he could have easily come out for the eighth. He was at 85 pitches. At that point, he had struck out 11. And what I noticed on Twitter was Jeff Passan sent out a tweet. And I guess it was towards the end of the game and then right when the game ended. He compared DeGrom's season this year, and it's still very early, to Pedro Martinez's 2000 and Bob Gibson's 1968. Statistically, two of the best seasons ever accumulated by any pitcher. And when you look at the numbers, DeGrom's are better. And you're talking about two Hall of Famers and two legends. So it's ridiculous. And I think when you watch him, it's almost like you kind of know the pattern. It's like, all right, first time through the lineup, we're going fastball. Then second time through, we'll incorporate the slider. Third time through, we'll start adding the changeup. And then I think once every 10 starts, he drops in a curveball just to have some fun. You guys, I'm sure, follow Pitching Ninja on Twitter, Rob Friedman. He does an unbelievable job. And if you watch him, I'm not a huge fan of pitch overlays. I know a lot of guys like it, but I love watching DeGrom's because if you watch him, the delivery is repeatable and it is identical every single time. And the only other guy I could think of in recent memory who did that was Mariano Rivera. Of course, he was doing it as a closer, basically one inning and done. DeGrom's doing it over the course of routinely 6 to 8 innings. And it's ridiculous. I said on the air the other night, and I stand by it, he is playing chess while everybody else is playing checkers because there are so many great pitchers in the game right now, and yet somehow he is a class above them.
I believe it's officially one curveball he's thrown this whole season, if I'm not mistaken. But he might have even snapped off one more against the Padres. But yeah, I think he's just having fun, guys. It's so interesting. Again, we're here with Gregg Caserta on WFUV. Now, Greg, we mentioned a little bit about this ball doctoring issue we're seeing in baseball right now. For one thing, it's no secret Major League Baseball did something to the ball before the season started. And now they're looking to crack down on pitchers doctoring balls in some way. And obviously people have different opinions on this. We've seen Josh Donaldson be very vocal about things. We've seen Pete Alonso this week be very vocal about things. So what is your opinion on this? Is Major League Baseball going about this the right way? Should they be addressing it at all? What is the issue here?
How do I say this without burning a bridge somewhere? Because, you know, now that I've gotten into the fold just a little bit, I want to stay there. Guys, it's a very dicey situation, right? Like, it's been this big unspoken secret, this thing that has been going on in plain sight for years. And all it took was for Cardinals manager Mike Shildt to have an outburst about it a couple of weeks ago and kind of blow the roof off of it. And now you're seeing Cole in that awkward press conference dodge the question. You're seeing Donaldson have these numbers. Like, you know, I looked at the spin rates and they've been down. And then you got Alonso kind of going the opposite way and kind of going the conspiracy theorist route of, no, I like this. I want guys to get a grip because I don't want to wear 99 in the face. You saw what happened to Kevin Pillar a few weeks ago. So it's a very tricky situation. I want to see a clean game. I just think that the way it was handled, it's just another PR blemish for Major League Baseball, if you want to call it that. The fact that now they're cracking down on it because offense is down and, pitchers are dominating this year with fastballs in the upper 90s and breaking stuff that you see sometimes just veers off into the batter's box. It's not as terrible as the steroid era. I don't think it's that awful, but in terms of how it was handled, I don't think it was done the right way. I still think that players should be policing the game. And I think it's still going to exist. I'm just curious to see what happens now when somebody gets their hand caught in the cookie jar, what that type of punishment is going to entail.
My question for you, I'm kind of curious. You think it's just a Major League Baseball issue, or is it also something that you see in the minors as well? Not to be on the spot here, but just curious, like how much of a widespread issue is it that the MLB can address?
I talked to one of our players about this 2 nights ago because I was curious myself because, calling a game from a booth, you're focusing on a million different things. You're not keying in on the pitcher and whether he goes to the brim of his hat or whether he goes into his palm. What one of our players told me is very interesting. He said, yeah, it happens here. It's not as commonplace. But he said that one thing that he notices when he feels that a guy is doing something a little suspect on the mound is he said that the ball actually makes a sound when it comes out. It basically has a snap when it comes out of the guy's hand. So that's something that kind of tips him off. I think that some guys, they're really not that secretive about it. Anytime I was told that a guy is going into the mitt, where it feels like he's trying to make it appear like he's fiddling around with the baseball or getting a grip on the baseball. If he's doing that one too many times, chances are something's going on. So it does exist at the minor league level, obviously. I just don't think it's as rampant down here as it is in the majors.
Again, here with Gregg Caserta on One-on-One. Just really one more question for you. And while we're on the topic of the minor leagues, something we mentioned earlier was how all of minor league baseball lost its entire season to COVID last year. And now they're finally able to get back into the swing of things. It was really the league that was affected the most by COVID. So this adjustment back into as close to normal as things can get for minor leaguers, from your perspective, what has that been like for the players? And again, what has that been like for you?
Well, I think when you look at losing a season, which I kind of knew when they canceled spring training when I was at Newark Airport back in March of last year, I was getting ready to fly down to announce a Phillies-Orioles spring training game. And it was 2 hours before my flight. I'm having a beverage before I get on the plane and they cancel spring training. And I go, oh boy, that's not good. Like, ugh. So I came home from the airport and I knew that our season was in a lot of trouble. I kind of held out hope thinking that, all right, maybe it'll be June 1st, maybe it'll be July 4th. And then as you got further along, you realize that it wasn't happening. You also got to realize, guys, that after the 2019 season, that there was that big change where Major League Baseball assumed operations of the minor leagues and 40 teams lost their affiliations. There was that cut line and you had 160 teams go to 120. They eliminated the short season teams. They've added these MLB draft leagues and these college leagues. And so what stinks about it is that, yeah, a lot of teams are back to business as normal. And, there are plenty of cities that, yeah, they look at it as, all right, 2020 was lost, but we're back in 2021. There are a lot of cousins in that family that didn't make it through. So not to be symbolic, like, COVID killed a lot of minor league teams, but there are teams that didn't make it out of there. So, I feel for the employees of those teams that had to up and pick up and move on, not just people in the front office, but you're talking about game day workers, people that work in the parking lots and people that work in the concession stands. You feel for the communities that bank on that, the fans that love going. A lot of times that's the centerpiece to their summer. It's for a lot of us, we're back and we're doing our thing, but there are a lot of teams that aren't back. And I feel for them because they were part of that big, giant, dysfunctional family that spans the entire country. I think that minor league baseball now is totally in a different phase. It's not what it was before, but I think as time goes on, I think that it'll get back to what it once was, just with not as many teams.
Understood. Greg, before we let you go, just want to very quickly say Alex and I are both North Jersey guys, so I think we can both agree. That's actually Taylor Ham.
You know it. Listen, I can't say this to my coworkers, but you know my thoughts on this. I got roasted for saying Taylor Ham on our first homestand. I love the hat, but now, when I'm down there, I got to placate to everybody. So when I go, I guess, into the 908 area code or whatever it is, I drop the Taylor Ham and go with pork roll. But as soon as I'm out of that ballpark, we all know what it is. Come on, guys.
Understood. We agree up here in the 201 as well. Yeah, no, but do that. Please keep your job. And please come back and join us again sometime. We really appreciate you coming.
Guys, and seriously, anytime you want, it doesn't have to be anything like this. You know how much I love talking with you guys. And whenever you need help, not just here with the show, but if you just want to reach out, please do.
That's the kind of mentality that wins you the Glickman Award, I guess one might say. That's Gregg Caserta here on One here on WFUV and all of our affiliates. We're going to be back with a little more of this show on the other side of this break, so stick around.
Be sure to check out all of our latest podcasts on WFUVsports.org or wherever you get your shows, including NFL Friday, Nosebleeds, Pick and Pod, 5 on 3, College Gridiron, and FUV FC. Also, our newest edition, Off the Air, diving into the station's legacy with its most prominent alumni. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
Welcome back. It's One, New York's longest running sports call-in show, just like we were earlier, and we are still. How about that? We're live here on 90.7 WFUV, WFUV.org, WFUVsports.org, Facebook, YouTube, Fleep, Florp, Twitch, Gobble, all these different platforms. Welcome on all of them. Uber Eyeball, my personal favorite. Sorry, that was my dog you heard in the background. It's Dylan Balsamo here along with Kelly Bright, and we're having a pretty good time here. But look, let's talk about something, Kelly. Now, I hate to be the first to say this and have another hot take like my Nets take, but the Islanders, they're pretty good.
They're not bad. They're definitely not bad. I mean, here they are. I mean, this is a team that just like other New York teams have just defied expectations, and they are right back where they were last year. They're going to be playing the Lightning again. So they're exactly where they want to be, and they did it by having a great series with the Boston Bruins. They showed up. This is a team we mentioned at the very beginning of the show that doesn't have a lot of all-stars. They don't have any one guy. Maybe Matt Barzal is the guy you go to. Brock Nelson has been huge for them, but they don't really have a top 10, even a top 15 player in the league. And yet somehow they keep finding a way. They keep finding a way to scrap together wins. And I think a big part of it is their defense. And I think a big part of it is also their coach. And this is a team that it's one of those New York teams that you just have to root for. The New York Saints. I mean, they're going by the Saints right now. I don't know, just because it's funny. It just makes sense for New York sports fans in the postseason.
It was also wonderful to see the New Orleans Saints be so on board with their name being borrowed for this little period of time here. And, Kelly, as much as you talk about this team defying expectations and not really having any kind of superstars, they are undeniably a team with an exponential amount of talent and depth down the roster, like you mentioned at the top of the show, that has brought them to this point. Just to catch people up in case you haven't been keeping up with the Stanley Cup playoffs, in round two, the technical, I believe it was the Eastern Conference Finals, I guess it really was. They defeated the Bruins in 6 games to win the East in a smaller conference as it is typically now. The NHL has 4 conferences this year, so now the Islanders move on to the Stanley Cup semifinals and will face the Tampa Bay Lightning, like Kelly mentioned. And, it's been a crazy ride for them. It's going to continue to be a crazy ride, but there's something magical about this Islanders team. And you could sense that as you hear in this little compilation clip we have here for you of their views on how the series went with the Bruins, their expectations for things with the Lightning. And these are players. This is head coach Barry Trotz. Give it a listen.
You want to close it as quick as you can, and we wanted to do that tonight, and we played the right way, and we got the job done. So weren't really thinking about Game 7 or anything further than that. We want to get the job done tonight, and it was a full team effort, and we're happy we're standing here right now with a happy face.
The place is rocking tonight. The fans were feeding us that energy. Team played great. One of those nights, Barry touched on it a bit after the game. You'll always remember moments like that. That was a big game, big team effort from everybody, and just feels good having full Coliseum there behind you and playing for them.
We got a group of guys that have been together quite a while. We've added some key pieces, and you get in these high intensity games, and guys just keep showing up for one another. It just builds a bond, and again, it's going to be no easy task. I think Tampa has a great team, defending Cup champs. So it's going to be tough, but we know we believe in ourselves, and we know we're going to need our best to find a way to take them down.
We've talked zero about Tampa Bay, zero, and we just we started out this journey to beat Pittsburgh. We started out, and then we were able to do that, and then we focused in on Boston, and we get a shot to go against the champs again.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta beat the best if you want to win it all. You got to beat the best, and I don't think anybody has been sitting here thinking about revenge on Tampa. Just trying to take it each game, each series one at a time. Now we can kind of turn the page and turn our focus to them. They're obviously a great team, defending champs here again. So it'll be a good battle.
I want to thank our friend and New York Islanders WFUV reporter Mike Messina for getting that little bit of sound bites together for us. But Kelly, the point is, there's a lot to be excited about if you're an Islander or if you're an Islanders fan right now.
So much to be excited for. I mean, anytime you get a rematch with a team that knocked you out the year before in the playoffs, it's exciting. And if you look back to that last match that they had with Lightning, and mind you, this is going to be the first time they've played them since that game because of the way that they've been set up this year. But you take away Lightning's 8-2 win in Game 1, the series was close. I mean, 4 of the 6 games decided by 2 goals or fewer, and the 2 rosters this year, New York has 19 players on that same team and Tampa Bay has 18. So it's a very similar lineup. Of course, New York without Anders Lee, but their defense has been their guiding factor throughout this season, especially in the playoffs. Their defense has been unstoppable. And they're going to be playing a Lightning team that to me is a little more talented overall, but they, like you mentioned, they just have this magic. They find a way, and they are very physical and they are very aggressive, which is something that the Lightning didn't really have to put up with as much. I mean, they play a much more physical brand of defense than Carolina did. So if they can find a way to, first of all, stay out of the box. You don't want to get in the box with this Islanders team, with the Lightning team, who's very strong on the power play. But if they continue to be aggressive without getting into penalty trouble and just find a way to get goals in the back of the net, I think they're going to be okay. The reason they were so successful against the Bruins was they were able to force people to make mistakes, and it wasn't maybe the most exciting style of hockey, but it's effective. I mean, you look at someone like Taylor Hall on the Bruins. He came into that series on a hot streak, and he just had 1 goal in 6 games. He had just as many fights in the series as he had goals, and that was because of the Islanders' defense. The Islanders they're deep, and that's going to help them going into the season. They're deep and they're scrappy, and they're a really fun team to watch.
I think you're right about the Islanders. They got a lot of magic. They got a lot of grit, more importantly than anything, and depth, as we keep mentioning. And, I think something that we don't talk about enough in playoff scenarios, but specifically in the Stanley Cup playoffs, is how much fatigue plays a factor. And that's not going to affect anyone from last season more than the Tampa Bay Lightning, because the turnaround was an odd one after last year, after playing the full length amount of games you could play and then having to play this odd season that's had to be played. That's going to affect Tampa Bay. That's something that in hockey more than any other sport seems to carry over between seasons. So that's something that's going to work to the Islanders' advantage. But more than anything, they just seem to have so much momentum right now. You talk about, maybe Tampa Bay is a little more talented of a team, and you might be right in saying that. I like to say, New York Rangers players like to retire in Tampa Bay because that seems to be what happens. But the point is, you look at this Islanders team, and not only are they really good right now and have a lot of depth right now, but there's a youth there as well. This is a team that has a sense of longevity. You look at the prime area of Islanders history. It's the early 1980s, 4 straight Stanley Cups. I'm not saying this team is at that level right now, at least, but they're really good, and they're really young, and they're going to be competing for a long time at this level. But let's take a look at the Stanley Cup playoffs in general, but in through the lens of the Islanders. They got the Lightning here. It's going to be a tough series, but they're going to fight through it, and there's a good chance they might win this. Look at the other side of things. The other Stanley Cup semifinals series, as it's being called, is the Vegas Golden Knights, who have never in their history had a bad season, I guess one might say. And then les Montreal Canadiens, the Conference des Canadiens. I think I pronounced that correctly. So, obviously there are factors that are going to play into this. Obviously you look at a team like the Canadiens, who are going to have to travel to the States for the first time this year. That might affect them poorly, could affect them positively. We'll see what happens. But you look at the outlook of these 4 teams, and we talked about the Nets being the favorites in the remainder of the NBA playoffs. To me, I see no reason. I wouldn't say they're the favorites, but I see no reason why the Islanders cannot win a Stanley Cup this year.
I don't think it's impossible, but I look at the other series in the semifinals, and I look at the Knights, and you'd be hard pressed to find a team that's going to beat them right now. You want to talk about momentum going into the playoffs? Yes, all 4 of these teams has played very well as of lately. I mean, you look at the Islanders; they're a team that they didn't score a lot in the regular season. However, they're the top scoring team in the playoffs right now. and you look at the goal totals in the playoffs so far, 6-5-4, 1-4-2. So they're scoring goals. They're playing better than ever. And maybe part of that is the fact that they're young and they're healthy and fatigue hasn't set in as much. Whereas you look at the Tampa Bay Lightning, they also just got 2 players who were resting for a long time. One was resting this whole time, and now he's back and he's been their best player so far. So maybe you could argue that they have a lot of momentum. I mean, but then you look, to me, you just look at the Knights and what they've been able to do, and I don't know if I can see a team beating them, especially after they eliminate the Colorado Avalanche the way that they did and made them look like pretenders almost. They just didn't even, it wasn't even really a close series. So I think they're very strong, and I don't know. To me, this is the winner of this the Stanley Cup is not as clear as maybe we talked about with the NBA. I feel like all 4 of these teams have good enough defensemen, good enough. I think the goalies on all 4 of these teams are very strong. So I don't think, to me, it's not as obvious.
Yeah, it's certainly not as obvious. And like you mentioned, goaltending is going to be a big factor here. I think, especially, you look at the Lightning have been one of the best goaltending teams in hockey this season. And the Islanders, at least they've proved this in the playoffs, are a team that love to score. So something's got to give. We'll see what it ends up being in the Islanders series. It really could be anything. But, you talk about the Golden Knights as well. And they are – it's interesting. It's very hard for a team to be as good as the Golden Knights are, and I really root for them. I root for the Golden Knights outright. They're not my team per se. But they're just a fun team to watch. I think there was a lot of naysayers when professional sports moved to Vegas, but they have just been so fun to watch, and they were good immediately. It's been very exciting. But, in terms of the Islanders, I think the real question here is, they're a team that's good, but they're a team that's younger than these 3 other teams, and a team that has, I would say, the brightest future of these 4 teams ahead of them in terms of the guys that got on the roster right now. So what is satisfactory for the Islanders? What is this already a point where you could be satisfied with the season and everything else is just gravy, or like would taking the Lightning to 7 be the most satisfactory thing to happen?
Because of what happened last year, I don't think you can be satisfied with an early exit here. You have to at least take the Lightning to Game 7. I think they will. I don't see a situation in which they don't. I think just their matchups. I think it is a good matchup, and the Islanders. It's going to come down to they have to stick to a game plan, and they have to be, they have to be good with their goaltending has to be elite. They have to stay above that 920 level, and they need to take advantage on power plays because this Lightning team is just known for stopping the power play and also being very, very good when they have that extra man advantage. So they just need to be disciplined. And if they do that, I see no reason why they can't be in the Stanley Cup finals. And I think making it to the finals would be, for me, I think that's the benchmark for success. Now, if they're able, I believe the Golden Knights are going to be who they would play in that situation. And I don't know if they have the team right now, especially without Anders Lee, to make that happen. But I think making it to, I think they should be aiming to make the finals. And once they're there, at least make it to Game 6, maybe. That would be, to me, that would mark a successful season for this team.
Well, after a really long time of being a subpar team, I think the Islanders getting to the Stanley Cup Finals would be a real benchmark in their history. So that'd be very exciting to see. We've got one more segment here on One-on-One. We hope you stick around. Our producer, Alex Wolz, is going to come on and join us, and Kayla Wenzel, too. But we'll be back in just a second here on One-on-One. We hope you stick around just a little more. Stay with us.
To support the WFUV Sports Department, visit support.wfuv.org to become a member or make a one-time donation. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
We got just a little bit of time left here on One-on-One, New York's longest running sports call-in show here on WFUV 90.7 FM. We're on WFUV.org. We're on WFUVsports.org. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube. And most importantly, we're in your head. It's me, Dylan Balsamo, here, along with my co-host for the day, Kelly Bright, Kayla Wenzel, who's been doing headlines for the day, and our producer for the day, Mr. Alex Wolz. How's it going, bud?
Doing great. Happy to be here. How are you all doing?
Very good, now that you're here. Now, I wanted to – one of the reasons I wanted you to come on is I think people, specifically people who watch this on Facebook and YouTube, don't really get to see like how the transitions are done behind the scenes, because it's a really interesting, setup that we have on the screen here. So if you could tell us a little bit about how you do that, I think people would really appreciate it.
Let me ask you a question, Dylan. Do you think people are really concerned about the back-end production of One-on-One?
I wanted to ask you about it.
Look, I appreciate it. I appreciate getting the limelight.
I want you to tell us, more importantly, I want you to tell me a little bit about the things that you are doing through the 3 hours while we are talking. How are you keeping the lights on?
I'm keeping the lights on. Well, it's funny because there's actually no lights on in my room, so I keep the lights on the show, but not in my room, so I guess it's backwards. But no, I mean, it's a pretty fun process. I mean, it stems back to about a year ago now, where we were thinking about how are we going to do this show, and we kind of threw around different softwares, different ideas. Folks at home, we use OBS to take you inside. None of this is interesting, Dylan, so I don't know why we're doing this, but I think some people might be interested in it. There's a lot of graphics that we make. We get the interviews edited in advance, so there's a lot of moving parts that we throw together, some transitions, and trying to make it fun for the audience each week, and hopefully for us here on the show as well.
Absolutely. I thank you for answering my question. It was really it was something I've always want to ask you about, and I figured the best time to do that was while people are listening.
Well, here's my question then, Dylan. Do you want to help produce the show? Now, this is where the real question now that you know the process.
Yeah, since the extensive course you've just given me and all of our listeners and viewers here at 1:45 going on in the morning, I'd love to produce the show once or twice.
Now it's on the record, so now it's going to happen soon. It's going to happen soon.
I'm going to have to do it before I graduate. I have to.
Well, hopefully we're back in the studio and we won't have to do it this way anymore. But hey, video's here to stay, folks, so look forward to it.
Absolutely here to stay. Now, speaking of video, those of you watching video will get to see this, but it'll be fun to listen to as well. Kayla, you mentioned before we got on the air today that you were looking through some of the crazy things you have going in the desk you're sitting at right now.
This is
what
true.
I want you to do is I want you to take 3 random things out of your desk and tell us about it.
Okay. Okay, well, first, I found a little R2-D2 guy. Where he came from, I have no idea who created this. I have no idea why it's on my desk. But it's a cute little guy. Look, he's wearing a nice little baseball cap. How patriotic. So that's one random thing on my desk.
Once we get into Star Wars, you're in my camp here. So, I mean, you can't see in my room, but I have a lot of stuff back here that's kind of hidden. That's all Star Wars stuff. So what a great way to start. This is a great idea now. Dylan, I'm all on board with this now.
I could make that connection to you right off the bat. I'm really happy that occurred.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, wait, sorry. Do you want me
tell us more, and then I have a question for the room. But keep going.
I have a Christmas ornament. I don't know where it came from. I don't know why it's here. And it's not Christmas. It's June. So I have that. And then finally I have playing cards from the Angels. Again, not sure how they got here. I'm not even a fan of the Angels. So
have you ever been to Anaheim?
I have been to Anaheim. Fun fact, I actually met Mike Trout. My mom was his babysitter once back in Millville, where he's from. I've never felt like this was a great time to bring that up, but you've given me a perfect platform to discuss that. So yeah,
Absolutely.
I actually have met him before and my family knows him. So
We don't talk enough about how Mike Trout is a Jersey guy.
we don't. He's from
he-
literally my hood, you know?
He's a top 3 baseball player alive, and he's from New Jersey.
He came from Millville, like
That's
the
pretty great.
little craziest town ever. So anyways, that's the fun fact. My mom was his babysitter once.
Wonderful. Okay, now we brought up Star Wars, so let me ask. So I know Alex is a Star Wars fan. Kayla is a Star Wars fan. I'm a Star Wars fan. Kelly, are you a Star Wars fan?
I'm a Star Wars fan, but
You can be honest.
it's not passionate. But I've seen all the movies. I have a younger brother, so I've played all of the Lego Star Wars games on Xbox.
Okay.
And I was Darth Vader for Halloween once.
Okay,
Aw.
well, that's plenty of background knowledge needed for because I want people's opinions on the sequel films, the sequel trilogy. I want people's opinions. Let's start with Alex because it's going to be a really juicy take. I can't wait to hear this.
I never thought this is where we would be on the one-on-one airwaves. But all right, so I'll get into it if you want me to. So when I first saw Episode 7, first movie for Star Wars I had to see in theaters, aside from the remake in 3D of The Phantom Menace, that was a great treat. But that was the first movie I saw in theaters. Enjoyed it. Thought about it a little bit afterwards, said a little too close to A New Hope to my liking, because to me, Star Wars has always been good because it does something new, does something different. So I'm a big prequel trilogy fan, so I was lukewarm on it. Then you get to Episode 8. And this is where things get interesting. The first time I've ever cried in the theater because of how bad I thought the movie was. I'm not going to lie about it. I really...
Goodness.
So now, I've thought about it a little more. My opinion has changed a little bit since. I saw the movie like 3 times. So I've warmed up a bit. It's not as bad anymore. I actually think it's a pretty good movie, but still not a fan. And Episode 9, at that point, lost all concern about what was happening. I want this to be an entertaining film. It was entertaining, and now we can move on. So at the end of the day, I'm not one of those people that dislikes the sequels. They're worthy. I think they're fun, but it shows the importance of having a plan. And I think that's the one thing that trilogy was missing sorely was a plan. So all in all, I'm not criticisms. I'm not in love with them. I'm just happy that they happened. And now we can move on to bigger and better things like The Mandalorian.
Like Alex or yourself, I enjoyed the sequels. I saw The Last Jedi in theaters, I think it was, and I loved it. And I think it was good for. I think part of the reason that maybe other people don't like it is because for someone who hadn't been involved in the stories as heavily in a long time, I felt like I could still follow it, and I was still like emotionally invested in it. And I thought it was a very bold movie, like at least from what I've heard from Star Wars, they made a lot of interesting choices, and I always respect people who are willing to take that risk. But I enjoyed it, but I'm probably not the right person to ask because I enjoyed it from a cinematic standpoint and just as a movie, as a singular movie. But as far
that's a great and that's a perspective I don't think those movies get enough of.
Right. As far as how it fits into the whole universe, I don't know, but I enjoyed the movie itself. I was very invested.
No, I think that's a great opinion, and most people who give their opinion on Star Wars films get too invested in the universe. So to hear someone from just the perspective of a film, I think that's a very valuable opinion. Kayla, what do you think?
I'm gonna be honest, you guys. I didn't watch the final one, the last one. I watched the first 2. I was about them. I felt that they were lukewarm. I agree with what Alex said. I felt like they were so referencing the originals like way too much. It just was like, I don't know. I didn't like them that much. I watched the first 2 in theaters. And then the third one, I think I just stopped caring. I totally dropped off. So maybe I'm a fake fan for that, but I did not finish them and I don't really care to. Like, I'm not making time for that either.
I'll say we all have a film we have to watch together now. Episode 9, Rise of Skywalker, put on the record.
I will say the Kylo Ren story arc.
Great. Great.
That was very well done.
Very well done.
I've heard about the end with him and Ray. I don't like that either.
Yeah.
That was.
I mean, shout out to Adam Driver. What a great actor. But yes. I feel very similar to you guys about, specifically episode 7, where it felt a lot like A New Hope, and I wasn't. What I also like about Star Wars is something new, and that's why I loved episode 8 so much, is that, Rian Johnson, who was the director of episode 8, really took advantage of the fact that there was no set plan for how this trilogy was going to go, and just went in a completely new direction. And I personally love that. Like the chances he took in that film, I think, were incredible. I cried a bunch during that movie because I loved it and was astounded by it. But again, that's just my opinion. And then episode 9 retconned a bunch of what episode 8 had to offer, and that really bothered me. But nevertheless, I agree with Alex that I was very entertained by it, and it was a fun experience in the movie theater to watch episode 9 together with people. That would be my opinion on the sequel.
Yeah, so let me clarify. I think the issue is not necessarily with 8, it's how 8 fits with 7 and 9. You can agree with that. The whole trilogy cohesively, like, where the issues. Now we're getting real semantics here, and 1 o'clock in the morning on One-on-One. This is really a valuable use of our time. So thank you, Dylan, for letting me talk about this.
I think it's funny because in the beginning, Dylan was talking about, before we were on air, he was making fun of podcasting that sometimes doesn't ever talk about sports, and they talk about something totally random for like 20 minutes. And here we are, 2 a.m, talking about something totally random.
I could do a whole show on this if we really wanted to. A whole show. I really could.
We should dedicate, because so every baseball team has a Star Wars night sometime during their season.
Crosses over in sports world a lot.
Yeah, so I think next, because there's a lot of there is a lot of sports crossover. I agree with you, especially like in action scenes and different types of things. So I think whenever the next time the Yankees or Mets do a Star Wars night, which I don't think either of them have yet this year.
Yankees haven't, no.
Yeah, maybe that. I mean, because I don't
May
know
the
if the Mets
4th. Did anyone do it?
You know what? I don't think so.
Wow,
So,
that was the opportunity.
So whenever they do, we need to do a segment here on this program, at least of like our favorite action scenes in the Star Wars film universe. Because I have my answer. Alex, you have an answer?
Favorite action scene? Well, I'm a big prequel guy, like I said. So I think episode 2, Geonosian Arena. That's my answer right off the bat. There you go.
I agree, Alex. I love that scene. That's my favorite.
My personal favorite is Darth Vader in Rogue One. I think it was like this, like maybe 10 minutes left in the movie, and he just walks by and destroys people. It was the craziest thing I've ever seen.
Talk about crying in a theater. That was another moment of crying, but a much, much different reaction. That was great. That was wonderful.
That was Rogue One was people were really lukewarm to Rogue One when it first came out, but I feel like opinion has changed on that as well.
I think I enjoyed it a lot when it first came out, and I think I still enjoyed it. That's a Star Wars movie right there, and that shows Disney can get it right. Disney can get it right with a plan.
Disney can get it right, and they chose not to. That's what's disappointing. That's what's really disappointing to me. But we don't want to spend the rest of the show just going after big corporations. But that scares me a little bit. So let's examine another thing in your desk, Kayla. Take something else out.
All pressure on my desk to provide the entertainment for today. Let's see, what else is in my desk? I showed this a little earlier. I have a ball of twine.
Of course, yeah.
That's not that interesting. I have I don't know, I have this bag. I don't know what it is. It's not that interesting either.
Okay.
It's for spike ball, I think is what it says. So you guys watch the spike ball tournament on TV? It was on the
No.
It was crazy. It was a co-ed spike ball tournament. Like, I didn't know that they had these. I didn't know this was like a legitimate sport, I guess. But it's pretty intense. And I didn't really know all the rules of spike ball. I don't know. I play it for fun on the beach, but it was a very crazy game and there's a lot going on. So I encourage everyone to look up like spike ball tournaments, spike ball championships. You're not going to be disappointed. Like, I think you'll like it.
I'm convinced it's low-key the sport of the future. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if in like 10, okay, this might be a very hot take, but in like 10 years, not even 5 years, there's like a college spike ball team.
I could totally see that.
Yeah. Okay.
No.
Here's a great topic I want to talk about. So I wish I'd thought of this before right now because this is a great topic. The sports that we recognize, specifically, like I'm talking about the Olympics in particular. The sports that we bring into the Olympics are changing rapidly. I just read, it was not long, it was a couple years ago that like disc sports were being recognized by the IOC. I don't think they're officially Olympic sports yet, but they might be eventually, like disc golf and like ultimate frisbee, which I usually just think of as like a gym class sport, but is now Olympic recognized. And you got like breakdancing is going to be in the Olympics, I think next Summer Olympics, if I'm not mistaken. And video gaming at some point is probably also going to be an Olympic sport. So let me ask you guys, what is an obscure sport that you would love to see get more international recognition that doesn't? Let's start with Kelly.
Dodgeball.
Dodgeball.
That's fun. Because I think that is, I don't know about you guys, but we played that every day in gym class growing up. And being a softball player, I thought it was so cool because as like a little 13-year-old girl, I would throw it harder than some of the guys. But I think dodgeball, I'm not even just saying this because of the movie, I think it deserves to be on ESPN. I think you could get some really funny characters in it. And it requires a lot of athleticism. It requires teamwork. It requires individual skill and strategy. I think it is more than willing to, or more than deserving to be an Olympic sport.
How about you, Kayla?
Okay. Synchronized swim dancing. Have you guys seen that? It is in the Olympics. It's like technically in the Olympics. It is crazy. These people are doing like cheerleading, but underwater. They're like making pyramids and then like catapulting people like out of the water and like into the air. It is insane. And they wear the funniest outfits ever. Like they have the crazy like bedazzled swim caps and they all come in as like, I watched the most obscure sports. I think they're so funny. I watched one time on like ESPN 5 or something like that of like this team of women, and they were all Marvel characters and their swimsuits, and then they performed and they did to like the Marvel instrumental. I don't even know how you can hear the music because you're underwater all the time, but they were on beat. They were perfect. I think it requires a lot of skill. They're holding their breath. They're treading water and throwing people. That's what I'd like to see get more appreciation.
We got to keep it quick here. So ultimate frisbee, easy.
Good, great answer. My answer is going to be synchronized equestrian horse dancing.
Oh my gosh, we're like close.
Yeah, so we got equestrian stuff in the Olympics. We got synchronized swimming, the synchronized swim dancing. We need to combine the two. I want to see horses dance together. I think would be the ultimate sport. But anyways, like Alex said, we are running out of time, so we're going to wrap things up really quick here. This has been a really fun show. I want to thank our guests today, John Jastremski and Gregg Caserta. I want to thank Sam Davis for coming on and talk about the Mets earlier. And, of course, we want to thank my co-host for the day, Kelly Bright, Kayla Wenzel with headlines, as much as it pained me. Our producer, Alex Wolz, who also came on at the end, which I always appreciate. But this has been One-on-One, a production of WFUV Sports. On behalf of my co-host, my name is Dylan Balsamo, saying please get some sleep. Love you. See you soon.